OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Alright, very welcome along. It's Monday morning. We are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed here, and we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch on youtube.com/offtheball. Just leave a comment on the live stream. You can tweet us at offtheball.am, or of course you can always text or WhatsApp us on 0879 180 180. That's the number. Shane, how are you?
Good morning, Ger. Good morning, everyone.
Any crack?
Very little, It was a busy weekend of sport. I think you'll agree.
Yeah.
It's tough to follow everything, but we tried.
Well, we're going to do our best to pretend we did at least for the next 2.5 hours.
Well, that's our job, I suppose.
Yeah, you're in the...
You're watching Robbie Keane and Tommy Tiernan.
I didn't watch it, no.
Brilliant.
Oh, was it? You're saying it's brilliant. Go for it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people online weren't happy, but...
you tell me what you thought.
There were awkward pauses, which Tommy Tiernan tends to do, but and very often Robbie Keane would be the one to give first and start talking again, which I found interesting. I thought the two of them would just sit there for 30 seconds staring at each other. But no, I found it interesting. He was a bit reticent to talk about his first date with his wife, but it emerged it was a brilliant story in the end. For anyone who hasn't heard of it, I don't really want to spoil it, but I will. He picked her up. He said it's the only date he's been on with his wife Teresa. Picked her up in Nottingham at the City Ground. Said, "Do you want to go to the pictures? You know, nice handy date. You don't have to talk too much." And she said no. He said, "Well, all right. Do you want to go for a drink?" She said no. So he just spun around for 10 or 15 minutes back to the car. Said, she was like, "What are you doing?" She was like, "Well, you don't want to go to the pictures. You don't want to go for a drink. So what else can we do?" So she got out, slammed the door, and he says, I'll maybe see you next week. She says, "No, I don't think so." And I think they just happened to meet again on a night out in Nottingham, and the rest is history. They're still married.
I was wondering how they rekindled. I mean, a very patient woman, you'd have to say.
I mean, fair play to her. Yeah, he was obviously had the little Roy Keane smirk on his face as he was telling the story, but
because this is at Nottingham, right?
Yeah,
it's at Manchester United that all the nights out that end up in the cells happen.
Yeah, but he did say that even in Nottingham he was always, because he was asked about his interest in women back then, and he said he wasn't really one to, he wasn't on the scene like that. He liked to go to the pub with the lads and have pints
and getting fights
potentially. Yeah, so that was right.
Well, that's what it's all well documented in all the books.
Yeah. So
he's a changed man, obviously.
I found it an interesting interview. So I spent my weekend watching it. I was watching Prince Harry last night, of course, as well. The big interview at 9 o'clock. And very surprising to most people out there that I would be watching Prince Harry, but my mum and sisters were quite keen to watch it.
You're very quick to blame the mum and sisters for anything like that. You and your dad, on the other hand, were in the other room watching the football. If he says anything good, tell us about it.
To be honest, I wouldn't have even known the interview was on. Without the sisters and the mother saying it at 9 o'clock. Let's turn on the channel and watch it. That was interesting, you know. And I like Harry too, because he's kind of sticking it to the monarchy anyway. So.
You're definitely a Team Harry.
Team Harry for sure. Team Harry and Meghan.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting chat as well. Got into plenty of deep, dark...
his frostbitten Mickey.
Yeah. His frostbitten Mickey. The book, I mean, talk about a revealing autobiography. I haven't read it, but clearly the excerpts, you're like, well, this guy has not held anything back here.
Well, maybe you'd hope that there's a little bit for the paperback.
True.
There's always an extra few chapters.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm surprised that you were watching it.
So am I.
Yeah.
To be honest.
But now you're sucked in.
No, not at all. My mum...
you say that now, but you're going to be following every headline going, "Oh, I know a little bit about this."
They've been trying to get me to watch The Crown, and they're like, no, it's not pro the monarchy, it's very historical based. But I'm like, I could spend my time watching something else.
I'm with you, Shane.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
I just couldn't be arsed, you know.
Right. Big revelation. So, because everybody on my timeline and in my various WhatsApp groups were like, this was terrible, the Tommy Tiernan Roy Keane thing, but you thought it was good.
Yeah, I thought it was good. Mostly sports based. His take on the Alf Young Haaland thing was fascinating. More so in what he didn't say. He was like, well, Tommy was basically saying, did it end his career, or it was a serious injury? And Roy's saying, well, he played 3 days later for Norway. So make of that what you will. And kind of left a lovely awkward pause sitting there as Tommy just stared at him. So yeah, clearly Roy doesn't follow the Haaland myths like the rest of us do. He says there's about 30 different stories to the Haaland thing, and there's only one truth.
Yeah, well, I mean, hang on. In fairness, though, his truth was that he let Eamon Dunphy take the blame for artistic licence in the second. Was that the second book? Was it the first book? Are there 3 books?
Yeah,
no, it was the first book. That was artistic license, and then they'd have fallen out over that, didn't they?
100%. Well, he did say during the Tommy Tiernan interview as well that he regretted the book with Eamon Dunphy. He said he enjoyed it because he would have to go over every couple of weeks, or Eamon would come to Manchester, or Roy would go to Dublin to meet with Eamon, and he said he shouldn't have written a book while he was still a player. Like, you should, he talks in punditry about distractions for players nowadays. He shouldn't have written a book while he was still a player, and he probably regrets that. The FA came down on him hard for the Highland stuff in the book.
At the time, it was like the fastest selling book in Irish history.
Yeah, crazy.
So he made a fortune off it.
You can't regret it that much.
I mean,
the Roddy Doyle one was more of a let's relax and go on the book promotion.
Let's settle scores. Let's settle scores.
Yeah.
Right, it's 7:35. We've got to get into this. If you have views on any of that stuff, particularly we're into your thoughts on Harry versus the royal family. I'm only joking, but whatever you want, you can leave a comment in the YouTube stream. Our performance rankings are imminent. Alan Quinlan's going to join us at 8:05 to look back on a busy weekend of rugby, some big stories. Owen Farrell's tackle. Looks like Munster are going to sign a South African hooker. Sports news coming your way at 8:35. We'll play a roundup of all of the weekend's GAA interviews. We've got Ciara McCormack at 8:50, who's returning to the League of Ireland. Graham Hunter's going to join us at 9:10 to talk about Gianluca Vialli and loads more besides, including Barcelona beating Atletico last night, and a few clips from the pay-per-view at 9:30 this morning. But at 7:36, it is time for the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Boom. All right.
Straight into it. Start with the red. FA Cup weekend. I think the magic of the Cup was there for all to see. We'll start maybe with Chelsea first. Wasn't very magical yesterday evening for them. 4-0 defeat to Manchester City. Some of the puns going around in the office this morning, Ger, related to Graham Potter and of course his namesake Harry Potter. So there were a few magical puns doing the trick. Phil Egan's effort was Potter in serious trouble. Sirius, of course, being Sirius Black, Harry Potter's uncle in the movie and book franchise. Cameron's effort, I think, was Harry Potter and the Half-Baked Blues, or Graham Potter and the Half-Baked Blues. Of course, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince being one of the books. And then, of course, Tommy Tuchel being He Who Shall Not Be Named. Tommy Tuchel and Voldemort having that in common. And the Chelsea fans were singing about Tommy Tuchel yesterday in the stands as Graham Potter had to sit there and listen. It was a bit awkward. But the performance from Chelsea, regardless of the result, clearly a 4-0 defeat is not good any time, but it just wasn't a great performance whatsoever. They're out of the cup now. It would have been nice for them to have a little bit of a cup run to distract them from the fact that they're 10th in the Premier League, 10 points off the Champions League spots. Pep Guardiola came out after the match yesterday evening and was very defensive of Graham Potter. Said stick with him. It takes time for managers to build these teams. He spoke about the time he was given time at Barcelona, but he had, of course, a little man called Messi in that team, so it was maybe a little bit easier for Pep Guardiola. But roundly booed the Chelsea players and Potter, of course, at half-time, and for the fans that were still there at full-time, because let's be honest, a lot of them had left to try and get the train back. But yeah, it was just... There was even sarcasm from the fans yesterday. If anyone was watching the game, you could hear the echoes of shoot, because they just wanted even shots, the Chelsea fans. They weren't getting anything in the match last night. City were too good for them. This was a City without with their main men, Haaland included. So you'd be concerned if you were Graham Potter.
Front of the Indo sports section, Curse of Chelsea now haunts Potter, and that's basically the headline on Eamon Sweeney's piece.
The Harry Potter link.
Bowley makes bad situation far worse at the bridge. He's blaming Todd Bowley for coming in and appointing Graham Potter. Potter's appointment was celebrated in some quarters across Channel because it gave an English manager a rare opportunity at a top club. But Chelsea have been down this patriotically minded route before. It failed with Frank Lampard and it will fail with Potter. The sad truth is that putting an English manager in charge of an elite team is like sending Father Dougal Maguire to do a funeral. Chelsea's current manager is doomed as a teenager in a slasher movie who volunteers to go outside and check the noise coming from the woodshed. He's loving it. He's feeling himself here. Like Moyes at United and Nuno at Spurs, there's no prospect of this appointment ending in success. The only question is, when will the axe fall? Bowley should take Macbeth's advice. If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. So I like that. I like the Father Dougal at the funeral. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't think all English managers are always doomed forever to be as incompetent as Dougal or the teenager in the slasher movie. I'm not sure that their nationality is the thing that prevents them from being good managers. I just want to put that on the record there for all our English viewers this morning. I don't think Potter's track record should prevent him from being the manager at Chelsea if Chelsea do have a long-term plan. That seems to be what the story is with the transfers they're making. But it's hard to discern a pattern in the transfers that they're making. It's very scattergun.
Yeah, and even the way Benfica have come out and claimed they were disrespectful in the whole Enzo Fernandez chase as well. Is this a surprise, the whole Graham Potter thing? Like, when he joined from Brighton, were we all not like, well, this could go very badly? This, like, things are going well at Brighton, you could stay there and continue a great job. Yes, it's very, very hard to turn down a job from the big six, I guess, in Chelsea being one of them. So I understand why Graham Potter took the Chelsea job, but in hindsight, because a lot of Chelsea fans didn't really want Tommy Tuchel to be sacked, so it was a poison chalice to some degree. I honestly thought Potter would be up to it.
It's a poison golden chalice that gives gold coins out, little ducats, little gold ducats every day.
That adds the pressure, though,
for the rest of your life. But like, he can, I presume he negotiated a relatively good contract, because it's a very long-term contract, right? Yeah. And so therefore, like, you can't turn down, you win the lottery when you get this job, and he can go off and work for the FA if he needs to as an underage manager at some point. Like, there's loads of routes for him to parlay this experience into something good and better afterwards. I mean,
I'm not sure about the point there about English managers not being fit to.
No, I think that, like, I mean, at the same time, it is interesting that this football culture has yet to produce a slew of brilliant, progressive young managers. Maybe Eddie Howe is going to buck the trend.
Yeah, is Gareth Southgate not one as well?
Is he?
What, bringing England to a European Championship final, or 2 World Cup? One World Cup semi-final, sorry. Bringing
the country with the most registered footballers to a position where they're competitive in international tournaments. I think until Southgate proves that he's a brilliant manager and wins something, I hate to be
was a penalty shootout from winning the European Championship.
Journalism only, you know, but the team didn't play brilliantly, did they, across the course of that? Like, has he managed to unlock this gifted generation actually performing in all the big games? I don't know. I'd say Southgate is good, not great, and grand, right, at this stage. Eddie Howe has the potential to be really good, I think. I don't think his Englishness is preventing him. I think Potter's circuitous route to get to the Brighton job proves that he's got an interesting take on things. And if he was an international manager coming from a different culture, everybody would be like, oh wow, look at what he did. He went off and studied things that were separate to what he was doing. So, you know, you can carve this any way you want. Like, the injury profile of the team at the moment is really bad. If they get some of those players back, if Todd Bowley is too shamed to sack him, then maybe he'll have an opportunity over the next 4 months to try and turn things round, and we'll see next season if Potter is still there after they've spent another $250 million in the transfer window in the summer, what the truth is about Chelsea. I think you've also included Aston Villa here. I mean, that's just
we got to throw it in, Ger.
Contributing to the magic of the cup. Taking one for Team FA Cup there, lads. When the draw, I saw on Twitter.
Come on, don't.
I saw on Twitter that the draw was made for the 4th round, and I was like, Villa are through to the 5th round of the FA Cup. This is great. Beat Stevenage today. Go to Stoke, no problems, and then 5th round of the FA Cup. That'll feel like a big game. That'll be great. So if I was as complacent as that, then presumably when Villa saw the team that was named, they were like, oh, we're just going to show up and batter these today, aren't we?
Yeah. And for anyone who's the eagle-eyed OTB AM viewers this morning will notice Ger is donning his claret and blue, perhaps by accident this morning, perhaps in
getting
support.
Dressed in the dark.
Exactly. But I mean, it's just not good, is it? Villa brought some of the big guns off the bench. They had a strongish starting team.
They finished with fairly close to
perfect team.
Well, you know, maybe if they'd pick the goalkeeper who needs game time.
Do you know what I think Villa need? Harry Maguire. Potentially.
Yeah.
These rumours have been doing the rounds of the weekend. Doesn't seem to be any truth to them.
No, there's no truth in them.
No. Would you not have Harry Maguire at Aston Villa, Ger?
So should we help a massive club make up for their mistake by saddling ourselves with the wages that they have overpaid this guy who is nowhere near worth what they paid for him? Yeah, that's a great idea.
But
look, we've just been exactly the same with Philippe Coutinho. How's that working out?
His transfer fee would be drastically reduced.
I
mean, you wouldn't be.
Presumably, it's on loan. And there's no fee, because if there is, you're like, okay, stupidity here. Like, Villa need to be looking at what Brighton are doing and what that tier of clubs who have good successful recruitment, where they're buying directly from South America or they're buying directly from second tier Spanish and Portuguese football, and they're giving players game time, and then those players are becoming seasoned internationals, and then they're suddenly worth 70-80 million, as opposed to taking second-hand cast-offs of failed players from big clubs who are already on massive wages, which is what they've done. They're paying Luca Dean apparently 170, 180 grand a week. What the hell's going on?
It's a bit mad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit mad, but it's not as mad as Chelsea. These things are not the same.
Don't be hiding this now.
These things are not the same.
I thought I was watching Sheffield Wednesday, Newcastle the other night, and really enjoying it. And I was thinking, this is the story of the third round. Newcastle being knocked out, the Saudi-backed Newcastle being knocked out by Wednesday, and then League Two Stevenage. And JP Wright has said it in the YouTube comments already. Watching Aston Villa implode was the magical cup moment of the weekend. This means the FA Cup is back, Ger. So here's a stat for you. A record-equaling number of Premier League clubs since the league's inception in 1992 are now guaranteed to suffer early elimination in this season's competition. The Cup is back, baby. We love the FA Cup. Wolves Liverpool was another one as well. And Unai Emery's a cup specialist. Hasn't he won the Europa League on a number of occasions?
I know.
As well?
That's exactly why I was thinking this is our route into winning the Europa League next season. Like, what were you doing?
Yeah. And apparently Emery had really been targeting this game, and I saw a dig. It was a fantastic dig from Stevenage on Twitter. So 66 minutes, the Stevenage Twitter account is live tweeting the match. They say 66 minutes, Philippe Coutinho comes off. The substitution took longer than usual as they had to dig him out of Luther James Wilden's back pocket. So, I mean, Stevenage not only into the fourth round against Stoke, but they're really going for it in social media as well.
Villa are not going to be relegated, which, under Steven Gerrard was potential, and so therefore it's not a completely lost season, but it felt like a cup run was there for them. The draw was really opening up for them. Loads of good teams are going out who, you would have expected maybe would have been better than Villa in a cup, and it's really bad. It's a really big setback this early on in what has so far been a relatively straightforward and good. Oh, it looks like there's a grown-up in the room, but just completely underestimated the challenge of Stevenage. So that's bad. But it's not as bad as Chelsea.
No, maybe not. Yeah, fair. It is fair. It's
what a battery. There you go.
So that's in the red. Chelsea and Villa after their FA Cup exits over the weekend. Also in the red, and I'm getting a sense of deja vu here, Ger, I don't know about you, is Ulster Rugby. Not sure what to say, because if you'd said before the weekend that Ulster would get 29 points on the board over in Italy, you'd think, okay, that's grand, they must have got a decent win. But they lost 31 points to 29 for Benetton in the URC at the weekend. Ulster's fifth loss in 6 games, the first time the Italians have beaten an Irish province since 2017, so it'll show you the difficulties they've had against some of the Irish teams. Michael Lowry had a score and penalty tries. Well, later on you're thinking Ulster are going to do this, it's going to be fine, they're going to get the result, and really after the performances of late and the comments from Dan McFarlane, you're thinking, they can at least get a bit of hashtag momentum and take it with them. But yeah, dying moments of the game, Benetton awarded that penalty, Cooney caught offside, Smith accurate with the boot, game over, and a 2-point defeat for Ulster. And if you look at their fixtures now, they have a very, very tough couple of weeks, Ulster. Back-to-back Champions Cup games against La Rochelle and Sale. I mean, do you really want that after the...
Will they score against La Rochelle?
Yeah, this is the thing. In France too, isn't it, that game as well? So the comments from McFarland, he probably learned from last weekend as well. He was maybe holding back a little bit. He said, we stuck in there, we're not playing as well as we can, it's not quite ticking for us as a team. Quite a few errors in the first half, similar to last week. And then he's saying the usual stuff, we need to be more productive with the ball, we're giving chances in the opposition third, and good opposition are going to take those chances. Benetton took enough of them to get over the line. You'd imagine La Rochelle and Sale, if Ulster pass up that amount of chances against those two in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be hockey scores, or cricket scores. Hockey's not that high scoring a sport.
They will be hockeyed. It will be.
They will be hockeyed.
Sport.
Exactly.
Thank
you, Ger, for
fix that.
Yeah, fixing me. So yeah, you'd be concerned, I think.
This is full blown crisis territory. Yeah. This is a shambles. This is very difficult. This is at the end of the season where, you're having your end of season review and your KPIs are all there on the dashboard, and someone's going, "How do we do?" It's like, well, apart from the bit where we went to Italy, everything was okay, because it's just very difficult to recover from this, right? And if it was a one-off, you'd be like, okay, that's an aberration. But can they blame the travel chaos for this? Can they? Is there a ready-made excuse? Because we went from it was really difficult for them because of the travel to actually there's a pattern emerging to now
I think people wanted to make excuses for them because, especially the Ulster fans, are like, well, there has to be a reason for this. The performances have dropped off so badly. Whatever about the results, forget about the results for a minute. The performances have dropped off so badly that the supporters must be thinking there has to be something going on behind the scenes we're not aware of. Now, maybe there's a couple of injuries. Maybe the team just aren't focused at the moment. Maybe the travel chaos didn't exactly play into their hands. But you have to look at it.
Maybe there's something rotten in the culture.
100%. But that's like, if they lose heavily to La Rochelle and Sale, which, by the way, is a distinct possibility in both games. I mean, what do? You rarely see in rugby teams being, managers being switched mid-season. Doesn't seem to happen to the same extent as football.
Well, Dan McFarlane seemed to be getting to grips with the problems, and so I think it might be interesting to hear what he has to say, because if he's calling the players out last week, I still don't really understand. So apparently neither Connacht nor Ulster made a play for Ben Healy. So obviously, I don't know, again, not to reopen that whole thing, but like, would he not have been somebody? Who are the players who are setting the tone and setting the culture and the high performance aspect of what Ulster Rugby are trying to achieve at the moment? And if those players are being given the freedom to call everybody out who isn't matching that, then great. But if there's a core of players who are being protected somehow by the coach, who are responsible for what's happening, then the coach has to go. But they need to, I would say, have a full and frank review, and the coach may be part of the solution as opposed to just expecting somebody, a messiah figure, to come in and fix what appears to be a rotten culture. Yeah, and it is statistically the worst runs since Dan McFarlane took over in 2018. If you're to pick any positives out of the Benetton game, it's that they came back well. They were 28-15, I think, down at one point in the second half. Came back to lead 29-28. And that showed a little bit of character, and Dan McFarlane referenced that after the match. The problem was then choked.
Yeah, the individual error then leads to a penalty for Benetton, and it's game over. They pick up 2 losing bonus points. If you want to look at that as something to grab onto, which they should. They're still 4th in the table. Yep, which isn't bad. And there's the prospect of postseason, and obviously there's qualification for next season to be at the moment, the run of form that they're on. I don't think you're backing them against anybody, are you? No, but right, they're in such a terrible run that La Rochelle, one of the top teams in Europe. Now, the answer to this might seem obvious, but is that the team maybe you want to play heading into a weekend like this? You're like, right, well, the pressure's off. The only hope is that La Rochelle are looking at this going, we can put the B team out here, lads, and it's still going to be grand. Bit of complacency. Lads, it's Ulster. Yeah, Ulster have become the Tottenham of the URC. Or worse, potentially. The performances just aren't good. I'd like to see them get over the line in one of those games. Like the game that they won against Connacht on the 23rd of December, which a lot of people won't have seen because it was 2 days before Christmas. They nearly managed to cough up a winning position in that one, where Connacht scored 2 tries from the 78th minute on and miss a kick for that to be a draw. And if they hadn't had that victory, then we're in full-blown crisis mode. But like, we shouldn't let the missed kick camouflage the fact that they gave up that winning position when the game was won and it was completely over with 3 minutes left to go. So who's responsible? Is it the CEO at Ulster? Is it the IRFU further up? Like, ultimately, there's a lot of money going into that. There's really good players there, we think. Unless we're completely wrong about the quality of those players, particularly in that backline, for example, then something has to change. Who's deciding what that culture is in Ulster Rugby at the moment, and who is responsible for it? But it looks like it is rotten from the inside, and something significant has to change. Yeah. So we'll talk about this with Quinlan in a little while, but if you're an Ulster Rugby fan, we'd love to hear from you, because we're getting a lot of criticism for not doing enough on Ulster Rugby. Happy to talk about it now, if you want us to. Yeah, absolutely. And let's be having you, as Delia says. They'll be hoping it won't be a 39-0 against Sale the next time as well. So, a lot to... And I think, performances will matter in those 2 games as well. So, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks with Ulster. In the Amber, very briefly we'll mention the snooker, of course. Ali Pali has been completely transformed, Ger, from the darts into a snooker cauldron. So, the Masters, one of the 3 major tournaments, the Triple Crown events, along with the UK Championship and the World Championship, is back. And Dublin's own Sean Murphy, or the Shock Win, the Rathfarnham man, of course living in Dublin now with his Irish wife, Big win for him yesterday evening, 6-4, or yesterday afternoon rather, in the Masters over in London. Played really well. Sean Murphy. Now the thing I would put alongside this, an asterisk, is that Neil Robertson, the defending champion who he beat, was very sick. If you listen to the interview with Neil Robertson afterwards, he wasn't well at all. He was coughing, he was spluttering, he didn't sound good. He said he'd spent a week and a half in bed over Christmas, his wife having to take care of the kids and stuff while he got a bit of rest before this tournament. Had a 147 attempt in one of the frames, Neil Robertson, that kind of broke down. The crowd kind of spurred him on a little bit, but it wasn't enough. Sean Murphy's already won this event. He won the Masters in 2015. Breaks of 98, 53, 61 and 100, and then sealed the victory to win it 6-4, so he moves on to the next round. It's only, of course, the top 16 players in the world in the Masters. And then yesterday evening, another surprise result. So the two games yesterday were both surprises. Hossein Vafai, the Iranian player who was only brought into the Masters because of the Chinese match-fixing allegations, beating Mark Selby 6 frames to 2, the three-time Masters champion. So 6-2 it was a very one-sided game, 2-all at one point, but the Iranian pushing on. He'll now face Murphy will now face either Karen Wilson or Stuart Bingham, and Vafai will play either John Higgins or Jack Lasowski in the last 8 on Thursday. So first time at this event for Hossein Vafai. No strain to the big occasion. He's got the better of Selby before, at the last 3 meetings, in fact, the Triple Crown event. So he's a bit of a bogey player for Mark Selby. I've only put Sean Murphy in the amber because big win for him, big shock beating the defending champion, but he still has plenty more to do. He's only into the last 8. So decided to put Sean Murphy into the amber this morning.
All right, on to the green.
Yeah, onto the green. We've got the Club GAA. Not sure if I've ever said this on air, but Malachy O'Rourke is one of the greatest managers there's ever been in any sport. And if I haven't said that, I'm gonna put that on record right now. Not to remind people, not to brag or anything, but I did say Glenn would win the All-Ireland Senior Club Championship. This was in the very early stages up in Ulster. This was while Kilcoo were still hanging around, with Mike Cullen to come in the All-Ireland semi-finals. This Glenn team are too good. And I haven't changed my mind. I actually think they will beat Kilmacud if they play to their capabilities. I think Glenn will beat Kilmacud in the All-Ireland Club final, which, look, seems remarkable because when Malachy O'Rourke took over a couple of years ago, they had never won a Derry Senior Championship. Never mind an Ulster. Never mind an All-Ireland. The man, as I said, touches gold with everything he goes near. Their work rate, their character yesterday against Mike Cullen was brilliant. 4 points to no score after, 10 minutes. Got out of the blocks quicker. Their midfield, Conor Glass leading the way for them, as he usually does. Tiernan Flanagan with the goal at the start of the second half was kind of the turning point for them, and in many ways killed off the challenge of Mike Cullen, although it was only 2 points in it at the end of the game. The worry for Glenn before the match was that they had a 4-week break after winning the Ulster title. Rustiness was something Malachy O'Rourke had mentioned, but they were fairly disciplined apparently over Christmas. They trained quite a bit over Christmas. They were vulnerable as well. Mike Cullen turned them over in their own 45 a couple of times, led to points or scoreable frees. So there were moments for Glenn, and they kept Mike Cullen getting back to within 2 points, but the better team, I think everyone will agree, won on the day, and they're looking to become the first Derry club to lift the Andy Merrigan Trophy since Ballinderry Shamrocks back in 2002, so 21 years ago. And in a fortnight's time is a date with Kilmacud Crokes to look forward to. Kilmacud, of course, who would win the Talton Cup, looking to first of all try and win an All-Ireland Senior Club Championship this year, of course, after the heartache of losing to Kilcoo last year with that last gasp goal. 114 to 14 points win over Cairns O'Reilly's. David Moran, who's been on the show with us, Ger, was brilliant for Cairns O'Reilly's. His high fielding was something to behold on the Croke Park turf, but Kilmacud just had too much. Interestingly, Paul Manion named on the bench for Kilmacud yesterday evening. Didn't come on, and I heard Robbie Brennan, the Kilmacud manager, kind of talking afterwards, saying, we'll see, look, a couple of weeks might be too soon for him, but we'll see. What I was reading from what he was saying was absolutely Paul Manion will be fit. Essentially, he'll be ready to go in 2 weeks.
All right, you weren't having any of it. No. Robbie Brennan has a screensaver of Kilcoo celebrating on his phone. It's actually the screensaver on his phone of Kilcoo celebrating last year. So it's a good line from Sean Moore in the Irish Times. Crokes manager Robbie Brennan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Was last February on his mind. Because obviously, as you say, at the very last second of the game yesterday, a free gets floated in to the edge of the box, and David Moran gets his hand to it, and it gets a bit of a ricochet, and one of the Crokes defenders is on the line to catch the ball under his own crossbar. Now, there was enough bodies there that it would have been like the end of all endings if they had managed to come back from the 6 points down that they had been So I think they probably deserved to win the game, Crokes.
Yeah, they did. The only thing I would say about Crokes is that there were some worrying signs, and maybe Crokes and Robbie Brennan will see that as a positive, something to work on. But
when they were 6 points up, there was a goal chance that would have made it.
There's 7 points up at 1 point with 10 minutes left,
and rather than tap it over the bar, they went for the goal that was going to kill the game. And you think, okay, that's the killer instinct that you want in your team. I don't know. I wouldn't be too pissed off at them going for the goal. It was a good save.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, the ball is being sucked into the net. So look, I'm sure Glenn are delighted that you keep banging the drum for them. I'm sure that they're like, no, shut up, Shane. Yeah. Shut up.
Just waiting for the text.
We're supposed to be under the radar here, and you're like, this is the greatest manager of all time.
Well, I think he's proved it. He's taken Glenn to an All-Ireland final now, who before this year had never... Imagine taking over a team at the start of a year and they've never won a Derry Championship, and wins a Derry Championship, wins an Ulster, gets the All-Ireland final. There's no ceiling for this Glenn team. They're brilliant. Their age profile is very good as well. There are some worrying signs with Kilmacud in terms of not being able to kill off games, but I would say Shane Foley and the Cairns goal yesterday saved a lot of goal chances, so Kilmacud could have won by more. But the final's going to be fascinating. Two very defensively solid teams.
Shane Walsh's also good at football.
He's pretty decent, and he had a quiet game yesterday by his standards.
But anytime they needed something, he was available.
He steps up, and then you look at Manion coming back into the team potentially in 2 weeks' time. That's going to be a final for the ages, I think. So looking forward to that one. Glenn versus Kilmacud Crokes. We'll move on to the other green now for the performance rankings.
Sorry, one last thing. We wanted to do the pitch invasion there. We're going to show the...
Oh yeah, of course, sorry, Fussa. I forgot to mention Fussa, the club GAA. So there was a false alarm first of all, and then of course the final whistle does ring out.
I think it's all over. It is now.
David Clifford, needless to say, is the man in red there as the fans head over. I mean, Clifford making the point, speaking with Ashleen after the game, that outside of Kerry the fans aren't used to it. Do you know, when he's in Kerry now, maybe there's less kids than that running over to him, but this was it Mullingar? It was outside of Munster anyway, so clearly a lot of youngsters who've never got the chance to maybe see David Clifford play in person, straight over to him to get the autographs and the selfies. And I don't know if kids go for autographs or selfies now, or ask for, or maybe they just try and get a glove or something off him, do they? Or all of the above.
Jersey.
Yeah, give us your jersey there. A great performance. Paulie Clifford was brilliant, and Fussa were just dominant against Castletown, and they go on to play Stewartstown now. And
I did see somebody on Twitter go, is this the first time there's been a proper superstar in GAA? I've never seen this before. I'm like, really? This happens? This has been happening my entire life.
Yeah, it's a generational thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it happens all the time, yeah.
Gooch Cooper was one.
Well, I remember queuing for Jack O'Shea's. The All-Stars played 2 challenge matches, hurling and football, in Thurles as a fundraiser in the 80s, and I remember queuing for ages for Jack O'Shea's autograph. Like,
he was your one.
Well, or whoever, you know.
I understand how those young kids feel. Like, those young kids run onto the pitch. I remember meeting Michael Donnellan when I was a kid, and a Monaghan man, but dad from Dunmore in Galway, and Donnellan. I was just off that age in 98 and 01 where I was susceptible to...
Donnellan was like an absolute superstar, where there was just this kind of, this guy can do stuff we've never seen before. But like, as a kid,
you
know. Whereas like older generations are like, there was a fella who did the same thing in the 70s and 80s. That's just how it goes.
It's always people looking back.
But this isn't, what I'm saying, this isn't new, and it's great. That's all.
100%. I remember meeting Donnellan in Healy Park in Oma after Galway Tyrone League game in 03 or 04, I think, and I nearly fainted. Like, meeting this man in person, I was like, oh my God.
What did you say to him?
Can you sign my programme? There was a lovely photograph of Donnellan in the programme, and he was almost embarrassed. If you've ever met Michael, he's quite a shy guy, but I can understand the David Clifford mania. So yeah, Fussa Stewartstown is a big one in the junior final, by the way. Stewartstown, is it Gareth Devlin, I think, is the old guy in that team. He's a bit of a veteran, scored 1-6 of their 1-14 against Clifton in their semi-final yesterday. They have been intermediate recently enough in the Tyrone Championship, so that Fussa Stewartstown game again is a big one. So looking forward to these club finals. They're set up quite nicely. Finally in green this morning, and I think rightly so. We started with the FA Cup, and we'll finish with the FA Cup. The Irish in the FA Cup, getting good headlines. The Wolves-Liverpool game, I think, is one where we should mention. Really good performance by Nathan Collins, albeit he had one clearance kind of across the pitch that was passed directly to Trent Alexander-Arnold, which led to the Darwin Nunez goal. Couldn't have done a whole pile about it.
He is man of the match, yeah.
Deservedly so. And Joe Hodge as well, I know, someone who stood out for you, Ger. Just a solid performance from a lot of Irish players at the weekend. You saw Promise O'Mashare scoring the goal for Fleetwood Town in a bit of an upset win for them as well. they beat QPR. QPR apparently have the worst record of any team in the FA Cup third round, which is quite a stat. But a big one for them. And that they're Fleetwood now beyond the third round for the first time in their history. Former youth international promise O'Mashare as well. Shane Long, really in the years.
Shane Long.
I mean,
and then the draw. They're going to
Old Trafford.
Yeah,
that's going to be decent.
Yeah.
Paul Ince, isn't it, in charge of Reading as well? So there's a few strands to that one. The draw, I think City fans and Arsenal fans have been looking at the draw going, no. Obviously Arsenal have to get past Oldham tonight, but the winner of Arsenal Oldham plays Man City in the fourth round. So City will have probably had to have got past Chelsea and Arsenal to make the fifth round of the Cup, which is quite extraordinary. But yeah,
Jason Knight scored. James Collins scored as well for Derby. There was loads of good. The FA Cup was an opportunity for a lot of Irish players. You kind of felt like maybe it might be an opportunity for Quinlan Kelleher.
Yeah.
A lot of conversation in the aftermath of the fact that he wasn't getting in the team for the Cup. Something changed. Is it just they needed extra game time? They wanted some confidence in the defence. What's going on? Why wasn't he playing?
Very surprised.
And whether or not that will lead to some conversations in January for him, I don't think it will. He seems happy enough being part of that first team squad as opposed to playing first team football at the moment. But good win for Southampton in the Cup, an opportunity for them to maybe
did well,
cast off the shackles, made some big saves was the report that I read as well. So yeah, not bad. Irish players in the Cup in green. Maybe we're reaching, you get to decide. It's the Gillette Labs performance rankings every Monday. We put a box up on Sunday evening on Instagram, but in the meantime, of course, you can tweet us at Off The Ball AM if there's anybody you think should be in green, in amber or in red.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
Fergus Keogh wants to know, Christ almighty, is there no place to go to avoid this stupid British royal family nonsense? Turns out nowhere's safe, not even the living rooms of Monaghan.
First, just put on the record, I'm not a fan of the royal family. I'm not supporting monarchism in any stretch or way of the imagination. I was forced to watch the interview last night, which I did for pop cultural reasons.
Good morning all out there. Is today the most miserable day of the year, or is that next week, asks Shifty Lad. I think, is it not the Tuesday? The Monday.
Is there not a Blue Monday?
Is it a Monday? I don't know. Surely it was last week, no? We're always a week behind. Coming up after the break, Alan Quinlan. First though, you're going to hear from David Clifford after Foss's win.
David Clifford, congratulations, through to the All-Ireland final with Fossa. How does it feel?
It's brilliant, yeah. Look, I suppose the semi-final is a game where it's probably the cagiest game you can play in any competition, but especially here then with the prize of getting to Croke Park. So no, it's great to get over the line.
And what was it like out there today? It was 7 points, you were up at half time, but there was a very strong breeze out there, so you did take advantage of it in that first half, but you sort of did as well at the start of the second with Paddy getting that goal.
Yeah, exactly. Like we not that we thought we didn't think we were out of the woods by any means at half time. Probably, really, in fairness, we came out in the first 5 minutes really strong. Probably put the game to bed then, which was, it's a strange feeling then in games. You can get a bit flat and stuff like that, but thankfully we finished the game well again.
And I was speaking to your manager Adrian there, and he was just saying that you went away for the first time last night, obviously for the game, but it was your first night away as a team together, and he said, it's funny, that almost brings you closer together as a team.
100%. Sure, especially I suppose from myself and Paddy's point of view, we would have been only kind of coming and going from Fossa the last few years. So to get a bit of time like this together with the lads who we would have grown up with is it's brilliant. It's special, like.
And obviously winning the All-Ireland this year, Footballer of the Year, you've had quite the year. I'm not going to go through everything that you won, but obviously you're on track to win a Club All-Ireland, obviously one game to go. But what does it feel like, I suppose, with your club? Is it extra special?
It is, definitely, yeah. Obviously, look, the Kerry stuff is what you always look to do when you're growing up. Whereas with Fossa, there's probably days we were questioning maybe whether this would ever happen first, because the Kerry Championship is so strong. So now, as I said, it's special, and I suppose it'll be all undone is the only thing if we don't get over the line next week. So everything is riding on that one.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB Sports Rugby.
Carberry's played well for Ireland every time he's been called on. He probably plays better for Ireland than he does for Munster. Some of the hype around Jack Crowley has been premature. He's played pretty well, but having him as the second coming of Christ seems to be a little bit aggressive.
Subscribe to the rugby stream on the OTB Sports app now.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Yeah, just a reminder, of course, that David Clifford is 23. He will be 24 this month.
Here, lads.
We could have another 10 years of this level of achievement.
Leave it out.
Hopefully, if we're lucky.
Yeah, of course.
Touch wood that injuries will prevent him. Won't prevent him from reaching those heady heights. 9 minutes past 8 this morning. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. You can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. You can tweet us at Off the Ball AM. Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. Yeah, still coughing a bit, Ger, unfortunately.
Well, hopefully we'll get through this. We'll talk about Ulster in a moment, but should we talk about Owen Farrell and his tackle first? I know this was one of the things coming out of the Premiership this weekend. I hadn't seen the video, and we were talking about it pre-show, and I was like, oh, it's fairly typical. And I was like, oh, was it one of those tackles where he leads with his arm? I was like, yeah, exactly, that's exactly it. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, I've seen this tackle from Owen Farrell a lot. What's going on here?
Yeah, I think it's obviously there's so much talk about the reducing the tackle height and players' shoulder to head and the neck area. I think on Friday night, for anyone who didn't see it, 74th minute, he's at the side of a ruck on Farrell against Gloucester, and Jack Clement, one of the Gloucester players, picks it around the side, and Owen Farrell looks to make the tackle, and there's a shoulder to the neck and the chin, clear contact. And I think probably the frustrating part about this is, with the new World Rugby directives that have come into place since the 1st of January, one of those directives was to try and speed up the TMO process and hurry things on a little bit, because there's a lot of time being lost in the game, players walking into lineouts, penalty kicks, conversions, all that kind of stuff. So I think the referee, Carl Dixon, maybe had that in his mind, and he was asking the TMO, was it in the previous phase of play? And if it was, we can't go back and look at it. And Claire Hodnett was the TMO. She said she wasn't sure. It was about 6 phases before the ball hadn't gone out of play, so they should have went back and looked at it, and they didn't. And obviously, if you see it, you see the thing live on the TV or see it afterwards. I think it's a clear red card, and I suppose it could be significant. He may be cited yet. He plays on the last 5 or 6 minutes and gets a drop goal when the clock is in the red to win it for Saracens. And it just kind of highlights, even at this stage, that it shouldn't be happening. It should have been dealt with on the field, and the referee, Carl Dixon, and the TMO, there was a lack of communication there. And look, maybe he will be cited. I'm not advocating for players to be cited and sent off and all that kind of stuff, but I think there has to be consistency across the game with the shoulder contact to above the neck and the head area. And this was a clear one where it should have been dealt with. Yeah. It could have been a yellow. There was no arm wrap there, and he's a very physical player, and he's a brilliant player, and he's a top bloke as well. But we're trying to change the behaviours in the game right across the board, and this wasn't dealt with, and he got away with one really, and Saracens got away with one, and essentially England got away with one, unless he's cited. Yeah, and as of yet, we're still waiting to see. It looks like he probably will more than likely get away with it. Sexton got away with one last week, though, right? He did, and you asked me that, and he ends up breaking his jaw. And went for an operation. But I think the more you look back in that, and we've seen, the onus is on the tackling player to drop their body height, not the ball carrier. And we saw one previously where Keane Healy against Ulster, he got sent off for it and then got the red card changed or rescinded. It's difficult on the tackling player when their body height is that high and they receive the tackle. But it's very clear for me and for anyone listening or watching, when you're the tackle player, if your last movement is forward towards the opposition, that's when you're in kind of dangerous territory. If you're absorbing the tackle, it's a little bit different. But looking back at Johnny Sexton's one, he could have easily have got a yellow or possibly a red from that tackle.
On the Farrell incident, Quinny, is it the TMO's? Is it a calamity of errors? Like the TMO eventually says it to Carl Dixon, the referee, but of course time has passed on. The referee then says too much time has passed. for him to do anything about it and go back and review it. Like in football, you'd imagine if there's a foul, the game plays on, and even if it's 4 or 5 minutes later when the ball stays in play, the referee will still give the card at the end of that phase of play. But should the referee have gone back regardless, no matter how much time had passed?
Yeah, and I think there is a bit of confusion around that, and the TMO called it. Gloucester went up the field. It was 6 phases later. They end up getting into the Saracens 22, and that's where Carl Dixon was asking, was it previous phase of play where the ball went out of play? So I think what they're being told now in directives, if it plays on for a minute or two and the ball goes out of play and restarts again with a line out or a scrum or a kickoff or a 22 dropout or whatever, that you shouldn't go back that far. But that would indicate it's up to the TMO to kind of pick these things up on the go. They have to be clear and obvious, and you got to tell the referee that. So he deals with it really quickly, and we're not looking at replays and constant delays on whether it's foul play or not foul play. There was a total breakdown of communication here. And, this is a game that's on TV that everybody's watching. Loads of Irish people watching this game as well. Obviously, big audience across the UK, so everyone can see it. And it's not, I think what it shouldn't really happen that this kind of breakdown happens, the breakdown in communication happens, but that's exactly essentially what happened, and it wasn't reviewed. And Gloucester were really frustrated, I think, in the end. And
well, a whole league title can be decided on decisions like this. The whole notion as well that these old decisions, they all even themselves up over the year. They don't. Like, massive mistakes get made and you never recover from them, and careers get, I'm not saying in this instance that's the case, but like, good quality refereeing isn't that hard to sort out, especially when they have so many people watching stuff. And there was at least a conversation about this. They should have taken their time over it. It's potentially game changing, and it turned out it would have been completely game changing.
And Carl Dixon said, look, if it's in the previous phases of play where the game had restarted, and the citing officer will look after it. But I just think it's really important that, with the new directives, and we've seen a lot of the games so far, the referees telling players to speed up the kicks. You've 60 seconds for a penalty from the time it was awarded, or the time you indicate you're having a shot at goals. 90 seconds from a try being scored to take the conversion. Slow play is going to be penalised. So if you're walking into lineouts, taking all those things are good. Yeah. But the one thing, Jerry, you think it's kind of like VAR in soccer. You don't really mind how long it takes if you're the supporting team or if it affects both sides, these decisions, if they get it right. And for me, the foul play, or was the try scored, the TMO stuff, I don't care if you're waiting 5-10 minutes for that, as long as you get the right call. Yeah. And I know there is, World Rugby are trying to speed up the game, and that came from a conference that they had with all the different coaches in World Rugby, which is to be applauded, because the game is stop-start enough. But this TMO stuff, and Friday night, it was clearly wrong. And what would worry me more, again, this isn't about the individual, because honestly, he's a great player and a brilliant fella. But if this goes and there is no citing and it's not looked at, it's wrong, really. You know.
Okay, we should move on, because we need to talk about Ulster. We had O'Gara on, obviously, on Friday morning, and you were gently probing about how the game was going to go against Toulouse at the weekend. They absolutely hammered Toulouse, 30 points to 7 in the top 14. It's their first win against Toulouse, I think, since 2019. So they're in very good form, which is exactly what Ulster don't need heading into the next game, which is against La Rochelle. This is, we talk week on week about Ulster over the last 5-6 weeks, basically since the second half collapse against Leinster in that game that you were talking about, Cian Healy's red card. Something is rotten in Ulster at the moment, and where do you start?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a real lack of confidence has seeped in, and certain areas of their game that they were very strong at are now, you were not seeing it. Their maul was really strong at the start of the season. They were scoring lots of tries. their forwards were putting a big squeeze in the opposition. Teams have obviously negated that. And look, let's be honest, Benetton away with all their internationals are a tough. It's a tough fixture. So, and in fairness to Ulster, they've had an incredibly difficult run with a lot of away games. I think last week was kind of summed up where they're at, in that Munster game, and then they get themselves back. They take the lead in 77th minute against Benetton after playing poorly for particularly the first half. And then John Cooney gets penalised, and Rhino Smith, the Benetton fullback, kicks a penalty to win the game. They just look deflated. They look like a side that are kind of lost in a sense. They're lacking a little bit of energy. They're showing glimpses of what they can do, and I've said this throughout this really tough period. This is their 5th loss in 6 games. That certain things they can do are very exciting, but there's something wrong, as you say, and there is a bit of a crisis there now, and they're going through a really difficult period.
Those glimpses, Quinny, of positive shoots from Ulster, and Dan McFarlane mentioned the fact that they came back from 20-15 down and got that 1-point lead again, albeit then Cooney's cut offside and they give the late penalty away to lose the game. But are there any positives to be seen from Ulster at the moment, even performance-wise?
I'm not sure. It's hard to find them. I think the character look was and we can probably overplay the confidence thing. I think the character they showed to come back and get themselves in that position to go ahead. And all teams need those kind of moments where they're going through a bad run and suddenly they turn it around and get a result on the road. And this was one they needed. But I just think they didn't manage the game. Their game management at times is really, really poor. I think, they had a couple, and Dan McFarlane spoke about this in the Munster game, their entry points into the opposition 22. They had so many of them against Munster and came back out, got turned over, didn't get scores. So that would indicate there's a ruthless kind of dominant edge missing there. I think the Eric O'Sullivan try after 8 minutes was a real positive. McCluskey made a real powerful carry. They won the line out. He made a real powerful carry, play a couple of phases. Nick Timoney, big carry around the corner. And then, they come back in field and score a really, really good try. And you think it's dominant, aggressive, direct rugby. And I think when they play like that, I think they can get more out of the team. I think they've got into a state of believing that they can run around teams and they can cut them open with their backline. And when teams are defending well against them, I think they're having issues. But the positive is, I suppose they have the talent. They have some really good players, but they're not gelling together and playing like a team. And in saying that, I said it at the start, Shane, they've had a really dreadful run of games as well. And it's been really tough for them when you go back to, away from Sale, away to Sale, away to Leinster, away to Sale, home to a really powerful La Rochelle side. Then they're away to Connacht. Really tough run of fixtures. The Munster game at home, that's the one you think they're going to win, and they're going to win handsomely. And then they're away on the road again to Benetton. So it's been a really tough run. And obviously they're off to La Rochelle now, so it doesn't get any easier.
But that's the ball game. Like, Ulster are supposed to be building a team capable of reaching semi-finals of all the competitions they enter in. They don't lack for resources. They don't lack for talent in terms of the players we think are supposed to be good. But it's interesting how so few of them have actually made Ireland squads and made Ireland teams and are outperforming. There's very few of those players who make it to the Ireland squad and then overachieve. There's been a few instances in recent years where that's happened. But like that back row, we thought that, Lowry might make it, Balakoon might have a place nailed down in the team. They haven't kicked on. And is that because the culture in the playing pool is wrong, or the culture in the management is wrong, or the culture in the whole operation is wrong at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's hard to put your finger on it, but there's, I think there's a lack of leadership there, and reality of rolling up the sleeves and really dogging out games. you mentioned those players in the back line. James Hume is an incredibly talented player. Balakoon, and what he did in the game the other day was really impressive. I think he still has that bit of X factor. Mike Lowry got a great try. He's trying a lot, but they're just lacking energy as well. So there's something not right there. And who knows? I like Dan McFarland. I think he's, by and large, up to this point, you could say that there was a certain amount of excitement and progression from this Ulster group. They could have been in a URC final last summer, and possibly could have won it if they got there. So they were very unlucky against the Stormers right at the death in the semi-final. So they're coming up short a lot. I think it's quite frustrating for Ulster fans, and it's a clear indicator of the type of player and the level the players are at when they're being picked for Ireland. And there we say it, it's constant Leinster players doing simple things really well, building into a system, looking full of energy, flair, quality all the time. And the other provinces are striving for that kind of a setup. And you think Ulster are the ones that are kind of the nearest and the ones who can challenge at the moment a little bit more. But they've gone backwards in the last few weeks. So there's something not clicking there. In saying that, all sports teams have these kind of bad runs, and it can be difficult, and that's where you need good leaders to kind of help and take over, and one result can change things. So it's a really difficult game going to La Rochelle at the weekend, but they've got to kind of roll the sleeves up this week and hope something happens for them, because Sale at home the following week, they could be out of Europe, and most probably will be out of Europe the follow in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah. Okay, I do want to move on, because the speculation in the papers linking Malcolm Marx, the Springbok hooker, with Munster. If one big name South African signing comes in, does this mean RG Snyman won't be there next season? Can you have both in the team at the same time?
No, you can have both, I think, and they've been linked with Malcolm Marx on a few occasions before. He's obviously a fantastic player and would be another big marquee signing, and it's an area that, aside from Niall Scannell and Diarmuid Byrne and Scott Buckley, they need a little bit more depth there and top quality power and physicality. They're not going to be able to sign an international tight and international hooker. So maybe if Malcolm Marx comes in, he certainly helps the scrum situation a little bit. He offers a little bit more depth there to Niall Scannell and Diarmuid Byrne, who are very good players, but you feel it's an area that Munster need to strengthen and get more depth, because when it comes to the business end of matches, I think their scrum has creaked a little bit. Go back to that game against Toulouse, the quarterfinal in the Aviva, and that's where all the trouble and issues they had in that game popped up. And sometimes people think it's just the props you need big props to scrummage, but no, the hooker is vital as well, and he's a very strong scrummager, Malcolm Marx. So he would certainly add to any team. And if they get a little bit of luck with getting Snyman back, who's back running now, and get some games, they could have a decent run towards the end of the season. But
so you think
someone like Malcolm Marx,
you think they'd both be in the team next season? A couple of things, right? First off, if Marx is being linked this heavily, it'd be unusual for that to be hijacked by somebody else. It feels like if it's leaking out at this point, it's leaking out because there's good information. Is that your instinct about this?
No, I didn't really speak to anyone, I think, about it. I think he has been linked before, and I know that they were trying to get him. You would think that he would have a conversation with RG Snyman. I think with Johan van Graan leaving, Damien Dialende leaving as well, would that affect the possibility of more someone like him coming in? But I think there's nothing concrete. I think obviously Malachi Fekitoa hasn't played a lot, so they're the kind of two marquee signings, Snyman and Fekitoa. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there, but maybe they would have to, release Malachi Fekitoa if Malcolm Marx came in. But they can't make any decision about Archie Snyman until he gets back. And obviously, if he plays the rest of the season and has a run, he has another year after that. And I said it at the time, for him signing that extension was obviously it was great loyalty out of him, but it was loyalty out of Munster, giving him the opportunity as well. And I know from people who've spoken to him, and he wants to try and repay Munster a little bit and get back and play. But Malcolm Marx would be a great signing for him, yes.
We should give Connacht a mention as well, Quinny. It was a depleted Sharks team, albeit in the 24-12 win down in the sports ground. Weather was fairly torrid as well, it has to be said. But regardless of the maybe different Sharks team compared to the Sharks team that beat the Bulls recently, still a good win. And interestingly, Andy Friend quite heavily praising the 3G pitch afterwards. Turns out this new pitch is very much doing things in favour of Connacht.
Yeah, well, this is what they spoke about and the reason they got the pitch there being to be able to, play their high tempo, fast tempo game in tough conditions. And the weather was horrendous there as well. They're up to 11th now, and we said it on Friday, Shane, didn't we? How the importance of not just a win here, but possibly a bonus point win. There's no doubt the Sharks sent a weak inside, which is a pity in a sense, but it's them trying to manage their squad as well with the travel and the matches they have coming up. Leinster were very comfortable. I think they had to deal with, still the physicality and the only way you can deal with that, and we saw it in the Munster performance against the Lions, is pace, tempo, fitness, all that kind of stuff. And Connacht managed the game very, very well and threatened and had some lovely scores. And, 24-0 job was done. And I think they switched off a little bit. There was an obvious reaction from the Sharks, but a really, really important win against a side that could cause you problems. They certainly would cause you problems if they had their full team out. But Andy Friend would have been pleased with the job and the rugby they played as well. And the 4G pitch did make a huge difference because they were able to move that Sharks side around a lot, and they got some great tries.
Does it take the piss out of the tournament a little bit, Quinny, Sharks taking such a weakened squad, or can you understand from their perspective?
I can understand. I think they're down in 9th. They've only played 10 games. They've lost 4. So I think they're, with the quality they have and the depth they have and all the South African internationals, they're potential winners of this competition. And it's kind of strange to say that after 12 games, a team down in 9th can win it, but they can. So, it's trying to manage them and we've seen the Irish provinces rotate a lot over the years, and sometimes to the frustration of the English teams in the Premiership and stuff like that. So it's a pity that they changed so many players in a sense that you would think if they made 4 or 5 changes and had some on the bench and stuff like that. But I think they were kind of thrown in the towel a little bit. But this was a game that you'd really fancy the Sharks to go to Galway and win if they had their full side. Well, they could probably go anywhere and win because they're so strong. So we haven't seen much of that, and we've been praising the URC a lot and the quality of teams that have been selected throughout and the standard of the games. But certainly that one on Saturday was a bit of a mismatch, and the Sharks lacked a lot of quality there, but kind of got the job done, and I think really important for them, as we said on Friday.
Leinster pretty much got the job done against Ospreys as well. Not a vintage Leinster performance, but an opportunity for some of the younger players to get minutes, with the exception maybe of Dan Sheehan, who wasn't supposed to get as many minutes, came off after 51 minutes and went straight back on again when his replacement got injured, and he ended up doing 77 minutes, which isn't ideal preparation for your number one hooker this close to the Six Nations.
No, and every time I see Dan Sheehan, I'm saying, is he playing again and again and again? Such a brilliant player. And Leinster did struggle at the start, and it was a very strong Osprey side. They picked up vast majority of their internationals. Tipperick was captain, Alan Wynne-Jones was there, Thomas Francis in the tight end, Nicky Smith. So they did a lot of power and a lot of quality there. But Leinster just keep kind of getting the results, and I think the start of the game was poor for them. They gave up a soft try to Keelan Giles, brilliantly worked try up the short side, but you talk about the confidence and the body language and all that kind of stuff, and their work rate is just through the roof. And the tries from Hugo Keenan and Jimmy O'Brien kind of summed up where they're at, their execution and their lines of running. There were 2 brilliant tries that effectively won the game from us. Sheehan gets one in the first half, which is, on 36 minutes, it's Charlie Natai up the middle, and they just literally come back blindside with a wide pass to Dan Sheehan and his footwork. So they were brilliant scores, and it's a brilliant win, but it wasn't a vintage performance, and it was one that they struggled in at periods of time. But it's 12 on the bounce now, isn't it? So it was from their point of view a very pleasing win away from home, with lots of changes and lots of young players in there.
Yeah, Harry Byrne started. There was a clamour for us to see Harry Byrne play for Ireland, and we kind of all wanted to see what that would be like. That clamour has died down, and from his perspective, he just needs to get some game time and try and re-establish himself as a pretender, even, or a contender in that conversation, because he's not in that conversation at the moment at all, is he?
Just needs a run of games, Ger. You need to play and you need to be involved in kind of big moments in matches. I think it was a game where he had some really good moments, but they were under a lot of pressure and they struggled, Leinster at times, and they really had to dog it out. So for your fly half, and so often we see the halfbacks for Leinster getting an armchair ride with what's happening in front of them. He has undoubted quality, Harry Byrne. He's a big physical player, and he just needs to play a number of games. Playing one every 3 or 4 weeks, it's very hard to get any sort of rhythm and flow. But I'm sure he will come back into the conversation again, because he has the quality to do that.
Johnny Sexton's going to be fit now, it looks like, for the Six Nations.
All this backup talk was for nothing, potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be rushing him back, would you?
No, exactly. Give everybody else the chance in this, see what they're capable of doing, and then go, okay, we actually have depth. Or put Sexton in, and as Sexton goes, all our eggs are in the Johnny Sexton basket.
The only thing is the player himself, if there's any sort of chance that he will be fit.
He wants to play, yeah.
He wants to play, of course. He hasn't played a huge amount of rugby this season. Well, we'll wait and see. I think, if he didn't play, it wouldn't be a bad thing for Ireland, because going to Cardiff first up is going to be really difficult. Warren Gatland, the Warren Gatland effect and all that kind of stuff. And they'll really see Ireland as a massive scalp if they could beat them there. So they'll make it really difficult. And you'd love to see Johnny Sexton there win the game and for them to have a good Six Nations. But I don't feel it's an imperative. It's the most important thing in the world. I think he needs to be minded, not wrapped in cotton wool like you said before, Ger, which you'd probably do if you could.
Oh yeah, give him 4 months off.
Yeah. But look, it'd be a big boost if he was back around the squad and back training with them anyway, because he is the captain and he's great leadership qualities.
All right, Quinny, we leave it there. Good stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
We've been talking about Sexton and the comparison with the great American football quarterbacks. Obviously, the Tom Brady conversation was one that he'd been having with Lancaster over the years. Brady's in the playoffs, played a little bit last night for the Buccaneers in a meaningless game, but Aaron Rodgers didn't make it. He crapped out last night. He'd been on a run of I think 4 wins in a row, and it looked like he was getting back, although the 4 wins had largely been off the back of good quality Green Bay defence. And then last night, when all they had to do was beat the Detroit Lions, who had nothing to play for, they couldn't do it. And they've owned the Lions over the last 12 years, basically 15 years since he's been there. Largely you would chalk that down as a victory for Aaron Rodgers, because while he was in Chicago, he went, we own this town, but he owned Detroit as well. And he owned the Lions, and he couldn't get it done. This is like, last year he was the MVP. Yeah. The year before he was the MVP, in the midst of some various vaccination lies that he was spinning. Yeah. He was immunised. And you just, like, the cliff happens. I was thinking about this, right? It's the scene in the boat in The Sopranos when Bobby Bacala and Tony Soprano are musing on, when death comes, do you know about it? And Bobby's like, nah, I don't think you hear it. You just fade to black. And that's what happens at the end of the movie, right? Or at the end of the series. And like, Aaron Aaron Rodgers didn't really know the end was coming. He just faded to black last night. That's what happened.
Are you saying this is a Sexton warning sign?
I'm just saying. I'm not like you.
No, that is what you're saying.
You can make your own mind up about this. We don't know when the cliff is coming. I hope that the cliff is the week after the World Cup final. That's what I hope.
100%.
That would be an amazing. Like, you don't get to write your own story. Well, Dan Carter got to write his, right? Well,
we want the Lionel Messi ending for Johnny Sexton.
That's the word. That's where, like, come on, you be Leo.
That's all we want.
Don't be Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. And someone can stand up and be our Emi Martinez in the World Cup as well. We want that.
If Tom Brady had retired after the end of winning the Super Bowl, like he should have done, he's still married to Giselle, and he would have had that moment.
Sliding doors.
8:40 OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. If you want to get in touch, we'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream. Cathal Maloney is with us. Cathal,
hello lads, how's it going? Are you all well?
I'm very well, yeah.
Good.
Comment in about the best footballer in the country. Just going to try and not butcher this.
Conor Glass.
It's been deleted for me. Oh yeah, well, Conor Glass, when's he joining Crokes? I've lost it now. I'll come back to it. But I think you have a fair idea after a fuss. It's like, oh, that guy's good at football. When's he joining Crokes? Are we diminishing Crokes' brilliance here because they're such a super club and they're so powerful and they've got such a big pick? I mean, I know Adrian Barry's screaming at the radio at the moment, but like, do we appreciate the fact that they're a good team enough?
Probably not. I think they deserve a lot of credit. I know that they'll be disappointed with the way that they finished the game yesterday. I mean, they look to be in cruise control heading down the closing stretch, and O'Reilly's really hit back at them and had that chance at that long ball in at the end where it was flicked on and cleared off the line. And I know that Robbie Brennan, the manager, spoke afterwards that it is a little bit of a concern that their way of closing out matches has developed. But the Paul Manion factor is going to be such a huge thing over the next 2 weeks. He'll be back for the final. Well,
if you're reading between the lines of what Robbie Brennan's saying,
you think?
Well, he says, "Oh, look, I'm not sure. We'll see if it's too soon." But I got from the way in which he was speaking, I was like, this man, I mean, Manion's, he wouldn't have been named in the panel yesterday if he wasn't very, very close. And Brennan said he was very close. So you'd imagine another 2 weeks for him is enough. He's been in with Dublin as well, training with them, so he's getting plenty of training behind his belt.
I just wonder, in terms of mind games, are they trying to play that a little bit too, that if they do say that he is in contention, it gives Glenn something else to think about in a plan that they have to develop if Manion either starts or comes off the bench at some point. Is someone going to be detailed to man mark him, and how does that impact the way that Kilmacud will approach things? Shane Walsh played a little bit deeper yesterday, trying to a little bit of a playmaker, I guess, out around the 45, and probably not his best game in the world, but still, when he gets on the ball, just the burst of pace that he has.
A bit of an injury, a bit of a niggle at the end.
Yeah, that's what they said afterwards too.
Just a few of them were standing on his toes. He was kind of hinting at, which happens in a match by accident anyway.
Oh, by accident, yeah. The best player always gets his toes stood on. There'll be none of that from the Glen lads. They're all polite young men,
as we saw against Kilkenny.
You'd be delighted to bring them home to your ma.
100%, absolutely. You're saying we don't appreciate Kilmacud enough, Ger?
I'm just saying, do they get a raw deal because of all the resources and money and playing population bigger than Longford that they have?
Look, I tongue-in-cheek call them a super club quite often. I think everybody does, and I mean that in two senses. They have the resources of a super club, but also they are a super space club because, needless to say, a lot of
they don't like you call them a super club.
No,
they think it's an insult.
No, but they have great people involved in the club, and Shane Walsh.
But sure, doesn't every club have great people involved?
Yeah, they do, but it must be tough for a club of that size to make everyone feel welcome. It's easy for a club like Fossa, or probably most of our local clubs, which are much smaller than Kilmacud, to make people, call up the secretary or call up someone and say, my young fellow wants to join the club, no problem, and make them feel like $1 million. Kilmacud, that's tough. That must be tough, because they're getting so many of those phone calls every week. My kid wants to play. There's 100 phone calls probably every week coming in from parents who want their kid to join the club.
You're saying that it's almost, they're so laden down with the small bits of gold that it's hard to find the nuggets in the middle of that. Is that it?
Well, something like that. But I mean,
it's a metaphor, obviously. It's not real gold.
Yeah, but it must be tough for them. And the fact that they can compete on so many different fronts, the women's game, the hurling, the football, and still manage all of that, you have to be impressed by it, super club or not.
And you mentioned super club. It still hurts when you lose when you're a super club, because Robbie Brennan said that he has a screensaver.
I mean, that's brilliant.
Of Kilcool lifting the trophy. I mean, imagine looking at
it's
that.
It's a double-edged sword, right? And it is a double-edged
God.
sword, because, like, obviously, it's like, what do you think of that, Joe Brawley? And Donaghy's doing the sit-ups to Brawley's face. But equally, like, I remember watching trophy presentations, Armagh, Tyrone, and you'd see Geezer, like the big angry head on him, watching the trophy presentation, but it wasn't enough. Like the motivation is to get you to train, but like also perpetually being reminded of the moment where you failed. Is that actually good for you in the end?
That can't. It can't be good for your mental health.
I suspect it puts a lot of pressure on you now.
And is that what's going on with them? When they're 6 points up, they're like, oh Jesus, it's it's like the 2-0 is a bad lead in football. It's not really, unless you turn it into one.
But then you have to use those things as a bit of an incentive, and I understand why Robbie Brennan is doing that. But
I'd delete it now. I would change it to something.
But even Ashleen said it to him last night, and he said, well, geez, maybe, because this is before Glenn and Mike Cullen played their semi-final, he said, well, maybe in a couple of weeks I'll have Glenn or Mike Cullen lifting the trophy on my screensaver, and for another year he'll have that. I don't think you can think like that. I know it's to encourage the players.
It's obviously worked so far.
Yeah, so far so good.
And in a wider sense, this final is very interesting because Kilmacud are obviously they've been there before. I think they've won it twice before, and they've been in the final last year. So you have the kind of experience that they have as a club and as a panel versus the raw enthusiasm of Glenn, who are there for the first time, only came out of Derry last year to win their first title.
There's a good chance that Glenn find the occasion a bit too much for them, and there's a letdown. But it happens.
Semi-final could have been too big for them.
Well, it happens a lot where a team makes it to their first All-Ireland, and the powerhouse score 2 early goals, and it's game over, and it's a 6 to 12 point defeat, but it's never in the balance. That happens. We've seen that All-Ireland final in club matches particularly a lot.
But you could also say that the wave of enthusiasm and momentum that Glenn have takes them into it in a great frame of mind, where
hopefully
the Kilmacud factor is we have to right the wrong of last year, and they may be slight favourites heading into the match.
I almost feel like it could be more of a Caltra occasion. It could be corrected in this, but wasn't Caltra's All-Ireland win the first time they'd won their Connacht Championship and stuff as well, the first time in All-Ireland final for sure, and they did it. I feel like Caltra and Glenn, there's similarities here.
Kilmacud Crokes 9-4 on, Glenn 13-8, so it's like
tight, reasonably tight.
And
well, I can't see a spread, but that's a 2.5 to 4 point spread, I'd say. Not knowing enough about the odds, maybe somebody will correct me on that and give me an idea what that should be.
Yeah, it should be a cracking game now. There's got a lot of interesting plots. The Glen midfield is very strong.
Yeah,
they're very athletic.
Both teams defensively solid as well.
They're hardy buggers.
Yeah.
They've come through like a lot.
Hardy Ulster men.
Yeah.
And they've got Malachy O'Rourke, and I was actually digging into Glen a little bit more. They actually won 4 Ulster minor club titles in a row a decade ago, and then they went on and won, I think, 3 Derry under-21s with that fairly similar group after that. So like, this is a long-term project, and it's amazing that it took them a little while to break through in Derry, but it's testament to the strength of Derry club football that it took them that long.
And to Malachy O'Rourke as well.
Malachy O'Rourke obviously has helped, and Conor Glass coming back too, so it's kind of all come together nicely at a nice time. So there is a thing about trying to strike while the iron is hot. You may not get this chance again, and we know how difficult Ulster club football is to come through again, so maybe now's their time.
I just think they're going to do it. I just watching them even in the first 10-15 minutes yesterday, where they're getting the first 4 points on the board, and you're thinking, how are Mike Cullen going to, because Mike Cullen's running game was what got them this far. They're a brilliant team, Mike Cullen. But Glenn just did that thing where they put the 15 men behind the ball, frustrate the opposition a little bit, and just get enough. Was the goal early stages of the second half as well. They get crucial scores at crucial times, Glenn, and it's a hallmark of Malachy O'Rourke teams down the years, where tight games, but then a big score comes at a big time. And I was lucky enough as a Monaghan fan to see it for a long time, where you're involved in tight games, and you just think at the back of your head, well, there's going to be something that'll happen here at some positive time and an important time in the game. And I just think he's a factor that has to be considered. Robbie Brennan's a great coach as well. Robbie Brennan, I think, was named on Bernard Flynn's backroom ticket to try and impose Colm O'Rourke's Meath job. But
should mention as well David Moran at 34 years of age with a superb performance, and you just wonder, will he give it another year with Kerry? I know his manager afterwards hinted that he should.
You'd love to see him, wouldn't you? Like, you definitely feel like there's an opportunity for him to influence games down the stretch. Now, he might not be a starter, and that might be too annoying for him at this stage, but maybe he could be one of those, like the Dubs when they were doing their 4 in a row, 6 in a row, like the years 2, 3 and 4, they always had players who would come on and seal games and who you knew were absolutely capable of doing it because they'd had a decade or 15 years of experience. And if he could have that role for 2 or 3 seasons for Kerry, like, that's very, very, very important.
Yeah. Even as a person in the dressing room to have.
Yeah.
With experience.
Yeah.
Like, you look at different county, even my own county there, Drew Wiley, Colin Walsh, 2 very experienced players retiring there last week. But then you have the Vinnie Corey effect as well of lads who know him, like Conor McManus and Darren Hughes staying on for a year. Kerry need the same. They need David Morans and those players staying on for a year or 2. And that might be the difference in an All-Ireland or 2.
Yeah.
For sure. And the same for Dublin as well.
I think based on yesterday's performance, Moran would be that influence in the dressing room, but he definitely would be able to contribute on the field.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Sorry, yeah, it's like, it's more convincing them that there's a role that's like really, really important, as opposed to just, you're a bit part player because you're coming on for the last 10 minutes. It's like, that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
So what else going on?
Well, Graham Potter, a man under pressure after yesterday's 4-0 loss to Manchester City in the FA Cup. Chelsea just 2 wins in 8 now under Potter, and some suggestions that he could be heading for the exit door pretty soon. City poised to play Arsenal in the next round. That's if the Gunners get through their fixture against Oxford tonight. In the third round kickoff for that one at 8. The shock of the round came at Villa Park. League 2 Stevenage beat Aston Villa by 2-1. We mentioned the Gaelic Games action. It's going to be Kilmacud Crokes against Glenn in the All-Ireland Club Football Final. That's in 2 weeks' time on January 22nd. Big win for John Ram last night in the golf. He had a 10 under par round of 63 to win the Century Tournament of Champions. He finished 2 shots clear of Colin Morikawa, 27 under par.
We're all talking about how it's the year for Rory to win a major, but like John Ram must be looking at and has kind of talked about the attention that Rory's getting and how it's kind of pissing him off a little bit. Well, you got to ask him about that. Wasn't there something around that?
Yeah, about the live golf and that the PGA Tour's response and how they're going to change things.
Did you see, I only saw it yesterday, did you see the Ryder Cup video, the Christmas Ryder Cup video?
Missed this.
Luke Donald and Rory McIlroy. Did you see this?
No, I didn't see
You didn't see this?
No.
You hadn't seen it
I
either?
missed it, yeah.
Oh my God. 1.3 million views on Twitter. It's the Love Actually Say It's Carol singers.
Oh yeah, with the cardboard at the door.
Yeah. So Luke Donald calls to Rory McIlroy's gaff.
Do you know what? I started the first 10 seconds of this and I was like, this is going to be too cringe, so I stopped.
Oh, well, you
so
should.
I actually don't know what happened in the end.
The cringe factor is very high.
Yeah, well, that's why I stopped.
Well,
I couldn't do it.
It's very short. It's mercifully short. It's like 1 minute and 34 seconds. But I like your attention span there.
Yeah.
Enough attention span for the Royals, but not enough for the... Great. Okay. The great reveal, which I'm now ruining for you, I'm spoiling this shit video for you, so thank me later, is that it's John Ram. It's like, I want you to play more like this player, Rory, and it's John Ram.
Right.
I'm like, and then Rory comes out and gives him a big hug and it's like, I love you, I love you. They don't do the I love you, but like, you know.
This is actually Rory and Luke, it's not deep fake.
No, it's not. It's not a deep fake, unless it's a very good deep fake, because they do, like, there's bodily contact.
Right. Interesting.
Oh, weird. Really
yeah.
weird.
Jesus.
But like, obviously they're trying to woo John Ram back.
Yeah, I think he probably feels like he could be more of a leader in the European team, but he is. I mean, you need more than one leader in a Ryder Cup team of 12 players. But McIlroy certainly has the mantle of European number 1 pretty cemented.
John Ram's ripping it back from him now.
Well, there's one way, John, that's to win the Masters.
Yeah.
There's how you go and so. But he's an unbelievable player, and 10 under last night was a crazy record.
63.
Yeah.
Start of the year.
59 would be more... we were getting a bit of love on Twitter over the weekend for that. Well, not love. People were getting involved in the conversation about the 147 9-darter and hole-in-one. People saying we should have actually said it was a 59. Shooting a 59 is the... Brian O'Driscoll getting involved, of course, as well. So.
Congratulations on making your obsession now a national talking point. Well done, Shane.
Snooker, darts, let's go. Give the people what they want.
Yeah. 59 will be difficult now. Come on.
But is that the more comparable thing than a hole-in-one? Probably is.
A hole-in-one's a fluke.
But then a 147 and a 9-darter are both on a non-moving snooker table and dartboard, whereas a 59 could be on any course.
The thing is, what I would think about is the mental aspect of it. So for a hole-in-one, you're not trying to get a hole-in-one as such. Whereas if you shoot a 59, you've got to think about every next shot.
You ever had a hole-in-one?
No,
not yet.
No, not yet. Sorry, yeah, good one.
Yeah, Jesus.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
You've been watching the snooker, I'm sure.
Of course. Yeah.
Ronnie O'Sullivan plays this afternoon against Luca Brissell at the Masters, so it's in a bit of flux now, isn't it, with the suspensions for the Chinese players.
Yeah, Hossein Vafay with a surprise win over Selby last night, although he has the number of them in big tournaments. Vafay and Sean Murphy, surprise winner as well, but as we said earlier, Neil Robertson was sick, so a few shocks. Ali Pali was fairly turned around from the darts, same venue, and it just looks like a different place.
It's quite a change, but they have introduced the walk-ons, haven't they, for the snooker players?
Brilliant. Yeah.
So they're heading that direction. But,
mainstream.
Good television for this week. To watch
we're going to the Ali Pali. We're going to the darts. Ron Gara's coming along with us in December for a bit of a roadshow. So we're going to make it happen.
Nice.
Jerry's going to be there as well. He's going to be transformed.
Oh yeah. Robbie Keane. We have not mentioned this.
Oh yeah.
Portsmouth.
What's the story?
Well, he's been linked to it. I mean, I think it's a good opportunity. It's a good opportunity, and there comes a point where if you are being linked to different jobs, you probably do have to take the plunge at some stage. Portsmouth, a club with a good tradition.
He was at the Portsmouth game in the Cup, but obviously it was at Spurs, and so no one kind of took too much notice of it. But there's a possibility that there was some kind of he's open to it. That's what we're led to believe. He is open to this.
I think it'd be a good move for him to dip his toe in.
Chris Wilder and Neil Warnock, some of the more established names being linked with the job.
So there's a 3-man shortlist, is what we're.
Yeah, but there's others. Liam Richardson or Liam Senior. One of them is linked as well. There seems to be quite a big shortlist. Robbie seems to be maybe 3rd or 4th down the pecking order if you're looking at the names. I'd be surprised if he got it, given Wilder and Warnock's experience.
Yeah, but there's also a point where you've seen what they can do, and it's
yeah.
They're also like mid-table in League One. It's probably not a bad club to take over.
And it would be something fresh for the club, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, in terms of offering maybe a little bit of a jolt to get back up the divisions.
Bit of sun on the south coast as well. Not a bad club to take over, I'd say.
Yeah.
Right, anything else?
Sinead.
All right, good stuff. Colin Maloney, thanks very much for that. Jack Cosgrove says, rumour has it Owen Sheehan is flying back for the National Football League to be part of David Clifford's after security game team.
He's going to need it. Well, that's not a bad job for Owen, but I think he's going to need more than just a few, because that was hundreds of kids, wasn't it? Like that's, as he said it himself to Ashton afterwards, I was just hoping no kids got hurt. It's going to get to that point where stewards have to be running on as well, and maybe nearly surrounding him.
Yeah, don't be stopping this.
No, don't stop it.
No.
But just make sure it's done in a safe way, and
it's grand for now. The kids they can all look after each other.
Yeah, fair. Yeah,
I'm sure if one of them breaks a wrist here or there, sure isn't, they'll get the cast signed and it'll be
learn from
grand.
it.
Exactly. Powell 74 says Glenn put themselves in a lot of trouble playing the ball around in their own full back line. When they attacked, they were good. There'll be no fanning around in the back with Shane Walsh.
Jesus, no.
And Manion.
Yeah, I think Manion will be back. I'd be surprised if he didn't play some part, maybe not start the game. But Jesus, I'm looking forward to that game. I hope there's a good atmosphere. I think being in Croke Park, it can take away from the atmosphere a little bit in these club matches, but towards the end of the two matches yesterday, I think it seemed to liven up a bit, although it was all kind of consigned to the Hogan stand from what I saw. So it's going to be a big one. Derry versus Dublin. Sorry,
there you go. Potential big clash in the All-Ireland if everybody gets their way as well. Right, 8:57 this morning, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by Ciara McCormack, who has just signed for Treaty United, former Republic of Ireland international Ciara McCormack, ahead of the start of the 2023 Women's Premier Division season. Ciara, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. What was the crack with this? Was it always your intention to come and play in this season's league, and were you looking for a club, or did they make contact with you? How did that work?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't a planned thing. I Mary Curtin, who I played for Ireland with, who's a really good friend of mine, is involved with Treaty, and basically in Canada there's no pro league or any sort of pathway really after players are done university. So Treaty didn't have a great season last year. Talked to Mary and just again planned to go over to Ireland, and we'd sort of just talked about helping out with Treaty, and then I don't know, it just kind of snowballed, and I just sort of said, like, I've been playing and pretty fit since I stopped like professionally playing, and so I just sort of said I'd jump in if they needed anybody, and then it just one thing led to another, and signed and ready to go for the start of the season.
You make it sound like you're Michael Corleone in The Godfather. Just when you thought you were out, they sucked you back in.
It feels like it a little bit, yeah.
So, but obviously you wanted to. So somebody somewhere, there's a little voice in your head going, I'm not done, I can play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, all through COVID, actually, I was back home in Vancouver playing pickup all the time with a bunch of Irish guys, actually. And I think, I still get a kick out of playing. And, I kind of like the idea of just kind of even challenging myself to just give it one more crack. And obviously, like, I think I really like the idea of obviously helping younger players and helping them get off on a good foot. And so, yeah, just kind of worked out in Albin. The new coach is awesome. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited.
You quite clearly, Ciara, have the travel bug as well. Just looking at some of the countries you've played at the highest level in: USA, Canada, Denmark, Norway, Australia, Ireland. Like, it's the United Nations, essentially.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I never in a million years would have guessed I would have gone all those places, but yeah, I was very lucky. I had a really great career, and yeah, I mean, I think you learn something every place you go, and every country's different, and yeah, I definitely was very lucky with the places I've gotten to go and the things I've gotten to see. So
I suppose at your stage of your career, you know, as you say, Treaty United struggled last year. So is there an element of taking on a new kind of challenge? You know, a club that had a bad year, and it gives you an experience as one of the top players to do something about it and to kind of take the club back to where they want to be.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, obviously I was really lucky to get a chance. I'm Canadian, obviously. Whenever people comes out that I played for Ireland, people are always a little confused that I lack an accent or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I've always, I mean, my two biggest passions are helping. Like, I really do want to be a part of growing the game in Ireland, obviously giving back to the opportunity I got. And then obviously with Canadian girls, like helping them as well. And so it kind of, yeah, it's like a nice merge. And then I think also I'm always someone that, like, as a player even was a bit of an underdog, and I like situations coming in. Yeah, and even in the situation that Treaty's in, and I like a challenge, and I like to be a part of, like, you know, growing and building things. So I think all things considered, it kind of, yeah, it checks a lot of boxes.
Do you want to be a coach? Is that also part of your future?
I enjoy coaching for sure. I did my UEFA B actually in Ireland. God, like 10 years ago now. So yeah, I mean, I think coaching is something I enjoy. Is it like something that I want to make a prime focus in my life? I'm not sure. I've sort of done a lot of different things since I retired. So yeah, I'm kind of, to be honest, it's kind of like the first time that I'm like heavily dipping my foot back into the soccer scene, so to speak. So I'll just sort of see how it goes, and it definitely could be something in the future. But yeah, it's definitely not something that I'm like set on doing either.
It's amazing how the game has moved on as well, and there seem to be a lot more female coaches getting involved. Like I was reading as well, even when you did that UEFA B licence, Ciara, in Dublin, what was it, 40 odd people doing the course, and you were the only woman on the course?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. And to be honest, it was an incredible experience, but I'll never forget, like, I was really busy at the time. And the night before I got on the flight, I like checked through the email list, and like, as I got to like the third line, started almost getting a panic, like not seeing any female names. And then anyways, and then like rocking into, I can't even remember I think Bewley's or one of the hotels by the airport, and like just walking into a lobby full of men and, you know, whatever, being the only female there. Yeah, it's you know, it's the game and coaching, all of it's changed so much in the last 10 years. But yeah, to be honest, it was actually a really, really positive, awesome experience. I met a lot of amazing people that have gone on to do tons of great things. And yeah, it was really, I actually, funny story, I didn't really follow the men's premiership at the time. And I guess I didn't know, but Mile Jednak, who I think was Australia's captain, was in the course, and I had no idea who he was. And yeah, that night, after the first night, the guys were all excited that there was premiership guys in the course. And anyways, I played with Mile that day and like thought he was pretty good. Anyways, and everyone got a pretty good kick out of the fact that, like, yeah, when I said, oh yeah, like I played with Mile today, I thought he was pretty good. And they're like, here, he's the captain of Australia and Crystal Palace. Like, I think he's a little more than pretty good. But anyways, yeah, so it was a really cool experience to get to just mix in with like guys that were super supportive, and obviously a lot of amazing players there too.
Is that how you ended up in Oz? The Jednak influence?
To be honest, that like kind of being around those guys, I was kind of at the tail end and a bit burnt out at that point with soccer, and it actually really was like a big shot in the arm for me. And actually I did go on and play in Australia. It was kind of a fluke that it ended up that, like, you know, Mile Jednak was at the course, and then that's the country I went to right after. But yeah, no, just being around like those players and just seeing how well they did things, and like, I don't know, it was kind of the same thing where I'm like, I think I've got a little bit of like juice left in the tank and I'm going to go for it. So yeah.
Your story is quite inspiring, I think is a word to use, Ciara, because when you read about kids who, you know, I think about someone like Peter Canavan in Irish Gaelic football, who was told he was too small and would never make it in the game. Even from your perspective, like, you know, not getting picked for teams as a youngster, and I know you got the scholarship to Yale, but you know, even when you get the scholarship, not getting picked for games with Yale University, and yet you never gave up. There's a lesson in that I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I definitely was a player that, like, I don't know, it just was kind of like almost like you want to call it like the muscle of resilience, I guess. I sort of, from like right at the beginning, to be honest, when I was like 13, I was the last pick for like the team I got on. And so, I mean, I think with, some things we're naturally good at and naturally, just kind of are able to, very easily kind of do, and other things come a little bit harder. And I think for me, soccer was always something that I had to kind of just keep fight and get better, and then, like not make a team or sit on a bench, and then just like keep working. And I mean, I think it's like been like a great life lesson as well, and just learned a lot about sort of controlling your own destiny and like deciding yourself how far you want to go. And just like a lot of really good life lessons, I think, for me, not having really a very linear career in terms of how it's all gone. But so I mean, like this kind of is like almost like a perfect cherry on top to all of like not a very conventional career the whole way through, I think it's fair to say.
That muscle of resilience that you talk about, I know you've spoken quite openly as well in interviews in the past about your mother's battle with multiple sclerosis. I mean, the muscle of resilience, you must have taken so many lessons and continue to take lessons from someone like that, such a huge part of your life, and someone who's shown so much fight.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. Like when you have somebody in your house that, can't, get around, or everything's a struggle, and she does it with like a super positive attitude. So I think, if you're not getting selected for a team, or, I think from a very young age, I had a lot of perspective in terms of just what actual disappointment and hard things were, So I think it kind of made me maybe have things in perspective, and just kind of, just see somebody that was like obviously very close to me, that still is close to me, that, that's always had a struggle herself. So it's sort of, it was kind of like I said, it put things in perspective. Like you can't get that upset over like not getting picked, or, like I said, when I come home and watch my mom, like struggling to, I don't know, just even for her trying to keep her body like going and stuff. So, I 100%, that was a huge influence for me in terms of having a great example, really, like to put all of it in perspective.
We've obviously just qualified for the World Cup for the first time in our history. Is it a coincidence that you're suddenly reminding the Ireland selectors of your availability by jetting back to Ireland and going, hey, look at me?
No, I mean, that's definitely, I mean, it's an amazing accomplishment, and I think it's incredible that I think it's unbelievable that they made it. And I mean, I just, even to see all the, like how they stood up 5 years ago or whenever it was with the whole thing with the, I was definitely changed in the toilets into my Ireland tracksuit. So I just think it's an amazing accomplishment. The young players that they have are incredible. Vera's obviously done an amazing job with the team, but no, I'd say it's purely coincidental from like a timing perspective, for sure.
We've got Canada in the group as well. How are we going to get on against them?
I mean, they're a very talented team for sure, and there's a lot of really young, exciting players. But I just think that, I mean, the fact that Ireland's beaten some very, legitimate teams over the last 18 months, and I mean, I think they're the kind of team with the kind of, just ability that I wouldn't put it past them to pull an upset like they're capable of it. So it'll be a fun group. Obviously, also with Australia in the group, like I'm familiar with them probably more than other teams as well. So I'm actually probably going to be in Australia. I'm going to speaking at a conference there while it's going on, so I'm hoping to catch some games. That
is a good coincidence of timing for sure. We get criticised sometimes in this show for getting overly excited about young talent coming through, but it feels like legitimately this is a good Ireland team that we should be getting excited about, that's just qualified for a World Cup and that has the nucleus of a good squad of players. I'm not quite sure whether or not the talent coming through in the next generations, if we're ready to build on it, and I hope we are. But are we right to get carried away? It's a World Cup year, Ireland are going, we've got a little bit of a chance of pulling off some upsets. We should be getting carried away, right?
I mean, I think I'm a big believer of like, believe anything's possible. And I think there's incredible veterans on the team like Niamh Fahey and Louise Quinn, and Diane Caldwell and Anya, and lots of them that were, young players when I was there that are amazing. And then obviously like Denise O'Sullivan, and like there's some seriously like world-class talent on the team. So yeah, I mean, I I think that they've got as good of a shot as anybody. And I think you never know in those sorts of environments. And I think it's exciting. And actually something that really cool that happened last week was I'm over in Thailand, and I just started talking to an Irish guy who's not like anyway affiliated with soccer. And he brought up that they've qualified for the World Cup and referred to Vera Pauw as Vera, which I thought was like very cool that like women's soccer in Ireland is so mainstream now that like just a random Irish guy is like referring to the national team manager by her first name. So yeah, I mean, I think there's like great excitement and buzz from what I can see. I think they're capable of pulling off upsets for sure. So yeah, I say for sure get excited about it.
There's plenty of room in that bandwagon. Ciara, great stuff. Enjoy your time in Treaty. Thanks a million.
Thanks so much.
It's Ciara McCormack there, who has signed for Treaty United in the National League. Now it is 10 minutes past 9. OTB AM is live each morning with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish today. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. OTB Gold at 1 o'clock is Michael Quinlan after his exit in Rio. Splunk, it's live from 3. State of the Union with Keith Wood at 4, and OTB Gold at 6 is Sonia O'Sullivan, and the show will be live with Joe Malloy from 7 tonight. Remember to subscribe to OTB across all our social channels and to the OTB Podcast Network for all the best in the latest sports content even. Up next, Graham Hunter will be live to talk about Gianluca Vialli's legacy and the state of affairs in La Liga as the title race heats up in the break. You're going to hear from Shane Walsh, who was talking with Aisling after Crokes win at the weekend.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The more you play with people, the more you get used to their position, you get used to their movements, and obviously you build chemistry.
Did it take long to build the chemistry with Shane Walsh then?
No, didn't take long at all.
Subscribe to the OTB GAA podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts.
You made the probably tough decision to make that transfer, and obviously at the back of your head it was maybe to get to All-Ireland finals here in Croke Park. I'm sure that was probably a driving factor in it all, and here you are, you're here in that moment.
To be honest, the driving factor was just to be playing football, I suppose. Like, you look at, I suppose obviously I started the whole commuting up and down from Dublin and the toll it takes on the body, so like you're just trying to be playing football for as long as I can. Like that's what I love doing. And look, I'm part of a very ambitious group here that are really pushing things on. And like the standards inside the club even itself is huge. Like, and I always speak of it like the way they treat people that come into the club, be it for a week, for a month, for a year, for whatever. Like they always look after people, and like that's a huge sign of a great club that's ran very well as well. So like all that kind of connects together. And you know, it's been a very enjoyable experience for me so far. Like as in like the lads at training, everyone welcomed me on board. And obviously I had to buy into what the lads were doing. It's not them buying into me, it's me buying into that, and that's the way I want to be, because like at the end of the day, I want to play football, but I want to get on, Joe, meet new friends, make as in you're making new teammates as well. And look, it's been great, and please God we can put the icing on the cake the next day.
Absolutely. And I think something as well, you know, you probably would have came in here meeting new lads. I know we spoke to Andrew McGowan during the week, and he said that, you know, slotted in straight away to the team. And I'm sure that wasn't probably an easy thing to do, but I'm sure they helped you along in that sense too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think like Joe, I obviously met Robbie first, and I'd been chatting to Paul. I'd known Paul over the years. They might have got a better inter-county level, but Joe, I was chatting to the lads, and like then obviously met Shane, old captain, and a few of the lads, and just like that those little things like help. And Joe obviously is in, as I said, like you're buying into what the lads are doing, and I suppose they could see straight away in me that I was mad about football, and they could see, I could see it in them that they were. So like lo and behold, it was going to be a good connection as well. And Joe, the first training session, I remember my legs were dead. I was kind of back in the gym and kind of trying to get going with the lads, and I'd say they were saying, wondering what it was going to be like seeing that first training. But I suppose I'm kind of an outgoing person, so I kind of like to go meet people, have a chat with them, and you know, just make a connection. And thankfully it's gone very well to date, and please God it'll stay the same in the future.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
It's 13 minutes past 9. I'm delighted to say Graham Hunter is with us. Graham, good morning to you. How are you?
Top, yeah. Still buzzing after a hot weekend of La Liga football.
I want to maybe wreck the buzz a little bit by asking you about Gianluca Vialli, because obviously the news came at the weekend of his passing, and he'd been sick for a while. We did get that iconic image of himself and Roberto Mancini in tears at the end of their Euros victory, and it just felt like it felt like there's something special in that moment where here's a footballer who's won everything, who's been like the best footballer in the world, the most expensive transfer, and at the end of it, it comes down to friendship and love of the game and an emotional release. So that was the one that I remembered the most over the course of the weekend. Not the playing days and you know, all the glamour and the glory and all that stuff. It was just a moment that he shared with a mate on a pitch, where it was just the two of them, even though the whole world was watching. I know for you, it was a personal relationship that you had with him over a long period of time.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said there, particularly because football fractures loyalty, fractures friendship. Football tells great stories, great human stories, not just great sporting drama. But to see them scratch the one itch that for both of them was the thing that they lacked most, to take the Azzurri to a trophy, was fantastic, and it coincided with a period when Luca, at least for the first time, had seemed to have superseded cancer. When you talk about a personal relationship, that's true. I feel like I lost, let's call it a friend, because we were close. We were able to talk all the time. He helped me repeatedly throughout the years. I'd known him for 27 years. And again, when I said, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do the next thing? He would say yes. He helped me an awful lot. Funny, warm. I was twice in his home. It dated back to being sent out by an editor to Turin in 1995 to try and explain a little bit about the rise of Juventus, how they trained, why they were so fit and relentless, why it was possible. It seems ridiculous now, but when Lippi reintroduced the Tudenti 3 up front, in those days, it was still the case. People thought, this is mad. This is, you 3 up front, 3 in midfield. That's impossible. Not only did they do it, it looked beautiful. There was pressing. They were relentless in their running, whether it was Ravanelli and Lombardo or Vialli, Padovan. There was a number of different footballers who could slot into the 3. And when I went to Turin to meet him for the first time, Juve were training in their old Comunale stadium, which had been their infamous stadium of the last 40, 50 years, and playing in the Delle Alpi. And I was granted access to the club for 2 or 3 days. And the first interview I did was at the end of a double training session day. I know I'm using phrases that now become commonplace, but at that stage, for a Brit, a young guy brought up in British football, to see double training, to see the players staying at the club, having a siesta and food in between 2 training sessions, one at 10, the other one at 6, was an eye-opener. And to be told that I had access to speak to a translator, Ventroni, the fitness trainer who recently died, who was at Spurs until the end of his life. I was given so much access, but what it needed was for the journalism to work, was for one of the players to sit and explain and talk about what the sacrifices felt like, what the training was for, how it helped them. And Luca Vialli was the one who volunteered. He had fractured English at that stage. We had a woman from the TV station who translated, and it all started because in those days I was wearing a 3-piece pinstripe suit. I don't know why I chose it. It sounds ludicrous now, doesn't it? And so was he. He finished the second training session. He was obviously tired. He came in, sat down in a little dressing room, and he just reached out and he felt the fabric, and he was like, yeah, nice suit, but you're going to have to improve that fabric. And I thought, yeah, we're going to get on. And that suit joke remained a thing between us for the rest of our careers. But again and again, when he was the Chelsea manager, he would let me ring him up. When he was a Chelsea player, I could be in touch with him, looking for stories, looking for contacts. He would take phone calls on the team bus. When he was sacked, I was the first person to go and interview him. It was in his home. I found that an eye-opening experience. And he just opened up and talked about his pain. But across the years, when we did the podcast with him, Luca let me into his home again. It was elegance personified. This English gentleman feel that coincided with the fact that he was quite a privileged man. And when he was brought up in Cremona, there was a huge, elegant waiting room in his house, plus it wasn't a butler, it was a major domo who elegantly glided across the carpets you could lose your shoes in. They were so thick and deep. And yet I didn't think he flaunted his privilege. He certainly wasn't caught up with money. He tried to do good outside his career. He was a funny, witty, wry man. There was always, just like there is, if you ever watch De Niro's old films, there's always this little crinkly little grin, like he's seeing another movie in his head. And Luca had that as well. He would look at you with a little bit of a mischievous grin in his eye almost all the time. He was funny and warm, and I really liked him. So we were in contact through his illness and WhatsApping, and simply sending him love and support and prayers that he got well. And in the end, the fact that he did leave me feeling sad. He's younger than me. What the hell is he going for at this age? Brutal cancer again. How many times have we said that? Brutal. Shouldn't have been smoking throughout his life, admittedly. And one little pièce de résistance, when we went up to Sweden to Sven-Göran Eriksson's home to do the big interview with him, he talked about managing Vialli and Mancini, and he talked about their pranks, their mischief, how they ran the club. But he talked about how when he flew in to be interviewed for the job, Mantovani, the president of Sampdoria, told him unequivocally that he'd been selected by a committee of Vialli and Mancini, who were players at Sampdoria at that stage. And they would go on to win the only title in the club's history. But Mantovani had such respect for his two players, the gold twins, as they were called in Italian, Mancini and Vialli, who you opened talking about, that he went to them, who should be our coach? And they knew sufficiently about football in those days, in the 80s, without internet, to say it should be Eriksson. This should be our man. They selected him. Mantovani said, lads, okay, let's get him in. The three of us will interview him. Eriksson got the job, and fame and fortune and success followed.
It's amazing, Graham, to hear your personal stories with him, because by all accounts he was a beautiful human being as well as a brilliant footballer. It's funny, like I was watching telly at the weekend, and the late comedian Sean Locke popped up on screen on one of those chat shows, and then straight away afterwards I flicked over the sky and you see the old goals of Vialli and some great moments from his career, and you're thinking, albeit it's a difficult thing to think about now, but those goals and highlights from his career are a tangible legacy and thing to hold on to, and might not be much consolation for his family and friends, I'm sure, at this point in time, but a beautiful thing to have left.
You've linked it nicely, because Sean Locke was obviously a big Chelsea fan. But Luca was the major guy for him, and Sean was represented by the same guy that off the curb that represents Kevin Bridges. And there was a point at which I was supposed to have a Kevin Bridges interview, and it couldn't happen for various reasons. They're like, listen, I have one of our other clients. My first choice was Sean Locke, and unfortunately he was unwell at the time, and it proved again, as you say, to be terminal. And when you talk about Luca's goals, again, I loved him, I adored him, and he was good to me, not just professionally. It was a big human experience to watch him and to listen to him. But we mustn't, even when people depart, we mustn't call them angels. He was very, very demanding, and because he was so demanding of himself, initially when he became coach at Chelsea, one of the reasons that after a flurry of trophies, if you just look at the percentage amount of trophies versus days he was in charge, it's extraordinary. But he was so demanding in training that he burned a few friendships, because it was he hadn't quite initially, taken over in the middle of his career from Ruud Gullit. He hadn't learned how to leaven his approach to other players who maybe needed a different touch, a different attitude and training compared to his. And again, I'm not going to make him seem angelic. Jody Morris talked about, I kind of eulogised Vialli at that stage. And Jody Morris, who was his teammate, talked about like the mad experience of having this Italian man sharing a room when they were either on tour or in pre-season. Luca fucking room service, not wearing a stick, sitting in this shared room, smoking away and ordering burgers. So it's not my purpose here. And throughout the tributes, these phrases about how warm and intelligent and kind and occasionally gentle a human being he was, those echoed out because they're true. But none of us should be sitting and saying that those were the only sides of Gianluca Vialli. And also, to me, he was elegant, and he's definitely my favourite Italian footballer of all time. And if you think about the range of skills that encompasses in other footballers, that's saying a lot. But to me, he was archetypal of those images you're talking about, archetypal of the old style number 9 who work a defender. And if you were watching a Luca Vialli performance, you knew you were going to be watching intelligence on the pitch, because whether it was his day, whether his team won, or whether he scored or not, central defenders were going to be put to the test about how fit they were, how smart they were. And he was always scheming and thinking about how to help the team, very much team man. And I remember when he was sacked by Chelsea, it wasn't just sore to his professional pride. He felt that because he'd been totally upfront with them, he felt badly let down by them. And he referred to the man who sacked him as Mr. Nice Guy. Colin Hutchinson was the MD at the time. Again, somebody I was very friendly with. But it was strange for a guy who'd been a powerhouse at the top for Juventus, for the Azzurri, for Chelsea. In other words, he'd survived in a shark-infested swimming pool for a long time. But he was genuinely hurt because he felt that he hadn't been subject to fair play. What a strange thing that was to witness, and to get rid of his anger, he had to take up kickboxing in his garage. What a man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's definitely a legacy there, particularly in English football, because like when Chelsea signed Hullard, it seemed like a bit of an outlier, but when they added Vialli to it, it was like, oh, actually something has changed here. This is it wasn't just a fluke that they managed to get Hullard. Like, and it feels like that's a kind of hinge moment for Chelsea becoming the glamour club, or re-becoming the glamour club.
It was, because he was still at that stage where he was coming towards the end of his career. He was out of contract again. To my mind, it linked very strangely, because earlier that year I'd been in John Mark Bosman's parents' flat interviewing Bosman when the judgment came in from the European courts that he was going to win his case. And by the end of that season, Gianluca Vialli left for free. So he was amongst the earliest to be able to go at end of contract and choose Chelsea over Rangers. Because it had been Rangers that Juventus had defeated so thoroughly that caused my editor to say, go and study why is it they're doing this, why are they playing it. And Walter Smith was sadly departed now too. Walter Smith was the head of the game. He was negotiating via a Scottish agent, Athol Still, to try and persuade Luca Vialli to come to Ibrox at the end of the season instead of going to Chelsea. Now, in retrospect, with what was happening at Chelsea, it seems obvious that Luca would choose that. But he talked to me about how he'd found a like mind, a like soul in Walter, because Walter was a gigantic character who loved good food, fine wine, who loved Italy, Italian fashion, rock music. And Vialli and Walter Smith found real friendship and a real connection. So even if it sounds ludicrous to say, Chelsea did quite well to wrench his, the Premier League and the chance to play in Europe with Chelsea, all of that, those were attractions enough in themselves. And he had a bumpy relationship with Hullett, so it wasn't simply that they'd worked together before that attracted Luca Vialli. The idea about London life, still swinging London for him then, was really, really big. And I think he was iconic in terms of the way in which the Premier League was becoming then the number one brand in the world. And those images that you talked about, Shane, when they were pumped out around the world, and it was still a time when the impact of having Schmeichel and Bergkamp and Zola and Di Canio and Gianluca Vialli in the Premier League was doing enormous things for their brand. I think we talked about brands less, and I think the clubs perhaps were not that interested in what they were doing for the Premier League brand itself. But Gianluca Vialli doesn't just imprint on our mind because of his wit as a footballer, or because he was iconic in a Chelsea era when everything seemed to be happening in terms of like the stadium problem was gone and the footballers were attractive and multinational. He did a big thing for the Premier League in choosing London and choosing Chelsea, and I think he is iconic. And all I would say, there are many, many, many thousands of people who've lost much more in losing Luca Vialli, but I felt like I lost somebody who'd been really hugely important in my life, friendly, kind, who taught me things, who'd given me access. One of the last things he did after that Euro Championship that you were talking about was recommended to Mancini to come on the podcast. He said, "No problem at all. I'd love to listen to him talk to you." Just a generous, kind man, and in all sport, I think when you get people who are ruthless winners, to find as well that they can be thoughtful and kind and maybe a little bit just like us, I think it reinforces our love for them.
Yeah, 100%. Graham, that was lovely. Thanks very much for that. I do want to just ask you one last question about the situation at Barcelona, where it seems as if Xavi's got a grip of everything, and actually, because at the end of last season it started well, and then at the end of last season there was a bit of a tail off, and people were like, "Ooh, what's going to happen here?" But he's had his pre-season, he's had his World Cup extra pre-season, and a tricky game against Atletico away from home. They win that, and all of a sudden confidence courses through. Am I reading too much into this?
It's a monster result and game. It was just fabulous. It had everything that you want from La Liga, with lots of elements that you might see in the Bundesliga and the Premier League too, because it was frantic, it was end to end, it was so intense physically and mentally that several players were absolutely dropping by the end. There were chances galore, and therefore to draw back a little bit and say, look, let's take some micro from the macro. Yeah, things look definitely better because Xavi's players are performing for him, working hard for him. But there's a bigger picture to talk about. The top of La Liga, Real Madrid threw away the chance to test Barcelona again because they lost at Villarreal on Saturday. But if you look at the way in which a pretty strong Barcelona side went to a tiny little club, Intercity in Alicante, in the Cup during the week, the 3-3 draw at full time, they won in extra time. Fine, you're true. That's what the Cup's about. They conceded 3 times. They conceded 2 per game in the Champions League and were knocked out and are back in the Europa League. And if you want, now's not the day. I know you don't have the time, but if you want to put magnifying glass on some of the positions in Xavi's team, there's work to do to improve the type of player there. And yet they can't. They're really now much more manacled and hamstrung than they were last summer or last winter market because of financial fair play in Spain. So positive, definitely. It was if people didn't watch it, I guess it's on Viaplay in Ireland, and more fool you, it was absolutely fantastic. It jeopardises Atleti's possibilities of playing in the Champions League next season, having already been eliminated from this tournament this season. It further jeopardises Cholo Simeone's possibility of staying on as coach. I think at the moment his days are numbered and maybe don't go beyond this summer. So a titanic match, hugely entertaining, and things are going well for Xavi, but he has a lot of work to do. A semi-final in the Super Cup coming up in Saudi Arabia this Wednesday against Betis with a really tired squad. So before I join in and get Xavi's time at Barcelona 2 built up, let's talk again after the semi-final on Wednesday, and then potentially the final against Real Madrid on Sunday, and then you'll want to talk to me again, and let's see how they've done.
All right, looking forward to it. Graham, great stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.
That's Graham Hunter there, always brilliant. OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day.
I'm going to be over, actually. I've booked a trip with my brother and dad to United Barcelona, second leg, the Europa League, which is 23rd. We're staying till the Sunday for the Brentford game in the Premier League as well, doing a double head. We kind of did it last year where you have a couple of days in between, and we went to the Peak District, which was lovely. We're doing the Lake District this year.
All right,
but it's nice. I think it's to go over and kill the 2 birds. But that Barcelona game, especially when it's a second leg, there's a lot riding on that. I think it could be well set up. If United keep winning and Barcelona keep winning, all of a sudden
you're on the Ten Hag bandwagon. He's a man.
I think all United fans are on the bandwagon at the minute because he's won every battle he's taken on. He won the Ronaldo battle for starters.
Do you think, not to reopen a can of worms, but that actually he might be able to fix Jadon Sancho?
There's another battle. That could be the biggest battle he's going to have.
Do you think he might be able to fix him?
Well, I think
you have faith in him, right? To the point now where like what he's done with Rashford is remarkable.
I was very interested to hear Ten Hag talk about Sancho last week, where he said, I sent him to the Netherlands for a reason. He did all that individual training in the Netherlands. He said he wanted to get him out of the country and just to feel something different and not feel like he was in England and almost claustrophobic. And I thought that was a brilliant move. Look, it remains to be seen whether it will pay off, but I think if anyone can get Sancho back to where Sancho needs to be, it's probably Ten Hag. I think United fans trust him at the moment. And look, the draws are going nicely as well. Charlton in the League Cup, Reading in the FA Cup.
I mean, it's
the
almost
cups
as
are
if the
opening
hot
up.
balls.
I mean, it's all going for them at the moment. But I think the league is still a bit far off, but sure, still.
Fergus Gale says, I had a hole-in-one as a kid. I thinned the tee shot and the ball flew over the green heading for the brambles, but didn't it hit the top of the flag and drop right into the hole? Pure skill.
Yeah. So skillful. It's third of that on that list, I think.
It does feel as if they are absolutely fluky, even for the best players in the world. It happens so rarely for the best players in the world. But that shouldn't really be in the conversation, and maybe your 59 is the way to fix that.
Possibly.
Shifty Lad says, Farrell definitely tackles like a rugby league player. They really go for it. Would it be because initially he was always rugby league? His dad was one tough MF. Yes, his dad was tough, and I look forward to his other son playing for Ireland, because that seems to be how it goes. Right, that is pretty much our lot today. We'll be back tomorrow morning with fitness guru Sam Mulroy and plenty more, obviously talented intercounty footballer as well. Right now we leave you with Joe talking with Sinead O'Carroll and Clina Foley on the Sunday pay-per-view. Enjoy.
We knew it was half time because I could hear the music being played, and that is a point that Shane McGrath just makes. We've all made this a billion times. Maybe they'll listen one day. This is just alongside his piece on rebel songs at sporting events. He does just say on the back of the Leinster Celtic Symphony moment that maybe they will just leave us alone when we're in stadiums as a whole. He says, what this mess should also do, though, aside from not playing rebel songs at matches, is make the IRFU reconsider its entire approach to pre- and post-match entertainment, both in the provinces and at the Aviva Stadium for test matches. The determination to whip up the crowd through the use of pitch-side entertainers or music played regularly at absurdly loud levels may hopefully waver in the aftermath of all this.
Oh my goodness. And I mean,
what chance?
Do you know what? I think Irish sports administrators particularly, they have to think about, read the room, listen to the audience. What do we love to do when we go to matches? Chat at half time and have a real serious chat at half time about what we've just seen. We're not like, we're talkers anyway, and the Crow Park can be as bad. Just this relentless booming, music. It's just, I hate it. I just hate it. I do the personal thing.
Do you prefer when they get Daithí O'Shea to do a thing?
No, I don't want anything. I just want to have a chat with whoever's beside me. I don't know about you, and chat about the match and what we've just seen.
The Aviva Stadium is particularly bad, and if you're up high, you're near the speakers. And I turned around at one stage pre-match, and the music was pumping, and I just out of curiosity, and everybody behind me was glum. It's too loud to even attempt talking. They're just staring and contemplating their lives.
Yeah. But like it's this American thing of people have to be entertained.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't have to be entertained actually in Ireland. Okay, maybe for an All-Ireland final or a massive big and they have phones now.
Yeah.
We can just not talk to each other and scroll on.
It's just so loud. It's too loud to talk.
Poor Joe.
To be fair, even at 20 I was in nightclubs going,
it's too loud.
Let's leave.
I think there's probably an element of like trying to make it family friendly and to make sure that kids can get entertained and all that, but like you can't be all things to all people. So yeah, it's whatever about the pre and the halftime and the end stuff. Just keep it out of the actual match time.
The one where they play the rah stuff from the scores.
Do you mean literally the rah?
No, not the. Pardon me. But the one now for the scoring and the kind of the kind of triumphalism. I really hate that.
Yeah.
I really hate that. I think that's really arrogant.
Matches,
that's totally unnecessary.
And you know as well, because we see across all sports the homogenisation of stadiums.
Yeah.
And so the experience is now just the same everywhere you go.
Yeah.
It's the same 4, 5, 6 songs that are always played, and there's nothing organic that can start.
Yeah, like we had the Munster have taken on Dolores O'Riordan's, and that was kind of quite organic, and now that's played kind of all the time.
And that kind of came from Limerick Hurlers as well.
That came from Limerick Hurlers, and obviously after her death and stuff, which was awful, but it has become this nice organic thing that has happened.
It's not Seven Nation Army over and over again in the stadium. Yeah.
So if those things happen and then they can be adopted by the more official things, that can work well.
Yes, I have a similar protest with people who hand you placards that say things like try and yay. Again, all coming from American sports, things we never had, never needed, and I think are unnecessary.
We went to see England play Norway in Brighton in the Women's Euros over the summer, and it was probably the most family-friendly, inclusive sporting event that I've ever been to. So full stadium of about 28,000 people, huge amount of families, huge amount of little girls, but also like pockets of big groups of lads, like
boys teams,
like couples, like me, my sister, and my 1-year-old were there. You know, it was a real mix of different people. And there was a lot of, because it was 8-0 by the end, there was a lot of like Mexican waves and trying to get going. But actually the most wonderful part of it was there was like loads of kids chanting to each other. Like, so in the part of the stadium I was in, there was a group of young Norwegians and a group of young English people, and they were like just having banter, chanting over and back to each other, and it was actually really, really lovely. So it was this family event that they did make friendly by having a little bit of entertainment, but not too much, and they had a bit of, you know, the Mexican waves being started, but it did work. Like the young girls were entertained for the whole 90 minutes, you know, or 100 minutes, whatever football is now.
I had a similar experience. I went to see France, the semi-final of France-Germany, and it was very similar, and actually the beating of the drums was amazing, and it was led by this young teenage German kids, and you could see them down the front, and every time they started the whole stadium erupted, and it was very organic. Everybody kind of just went with them, and it was lovely, but there was nothing forced about it, you know. And that night right beside us actually was a whole underage boys team, and their coaches had brought them along to it, and they were mad into it. They just had the best night, and again, every time the drum started they were off. So it's just an organic thing. There's a very good article today actually, is it Michael Foley does it, about the naming on the Infantina thing. Is it actually Dick Same with it quite well.
We'll get to that. So you mentioned the length of matches. Cliona, you're mad for this.
Oh yeah.
There's a piece.
I'm a complete Grinch today, post-Christmas Grinch.
James Sharp has written.
What else can we give out about?
I'm getting it all out of my system.
It's okay. So in effect, the point has been made that Premier League fans are being left shortchanged. New figures reveal we're seeing less ball and play time. So since Opta began keeping stats 11 years ago, this is the all-time low. The Premier League you're watching right now, all-time low for ball and play time. We're averaging 54 minutes of the 90 plus injury time, obviously, ball and play. Newcastle, one of the worst defenders. Their matches see the ball and play for just 51 minutes of the 90 plus. Leeds, the biggest culprits, ball and play just 50 minutes. Whereas you won't be surprised to hear Man City, they keep the ball in play in their games on average 61 minutes of the 90s. So given the conversations at the World Cup where they just added on 10, 12 minutes sometimes after each half to counter these stoppages in play deliberately or otherwise, another option being discussed, which is the interesting thing, another option is to reduce matches to 60 minutes with a countdown clock. And the supporters would see that clock would stop whenever there's a break in play. Not necessarily a goal kick or a throw-in, but certainly for things like VAR, injuries, goal celebrations. David Dean apparently is pushing this. He's discussed it with Pierluigi Collina in Qatar. Obviously, I still think we might all be sitting there for the guts of 70, 80, 90 minutes, but the clock would show 60 and would pause at certain points.
I've always felt, I don't know where it came from and I don't know why, but I've always felt that soccer matches, football matches, 90 minutes is too long for a game. I'm sorry. And now they're even longer. And VAR is a huge culprit now, let's face it as well. It isn't just, I mean, I don't mind the post-goal celebrations, any of that, because that all adds to the atmosphere. But VAR actually is a big factor in it as well. But I actually have always felt, because of the nature of football, that actually you can get a 0-0 draw. Now, the level of Premiership, quality of the Premiership at the moment means actually, you know, the quality of football is so good. You don't get them too often, or you don't get the really bad ones. But back in the 70s and 80s, you're watching Match of the Day or you're watching English football and you think, oh my God, it should be 75 minutes max. And a lot of sports are a lot shorter. And I just think, why 90 minutes for a game that can potentially be very defensive and very negative?
To what extent?
I'm not American now. I don't want goals all the time.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think we've all had the experience of sitting through a match and it's in the 61st minute and thinking, God, this won't end. But to what extent do you think it's because there's just more to do now?
How do you mean? I don't understand the question.
Well, when they were devising this, life was pretty dull.
Oh,
whereas now you have limitless content.
Yeah, and you've got your phone in your hand and you're watching two screens.
You can go and do any number of things, hop in the car, you can go onto Netflix. You know, there's just more choice. And so suddenly 90 minutes.
Giving up 90 minutes.
It's a lot of time, yeah.
To what extent do you think it's that?
Itself, I just think 90 minutes. I always look at it and say, what more was introduced to that match by adding another 20 minutes to it? Surely 70 minutes max is enough. I mean, rugby is, what is it now? It's
forever.
Well, I was
about to feel as long now because of all the stoppages.
I was about to make the point. So, like, I do think officials in sports should watch each other's sports more, because like they're looking going, do you know what we should do? We should do what rugby do, and what annoys everybody about rugby like that. It just goes on and on and on, and the time wasting is worse because of the stop clock, because the clock is stopped. And you can take what did Ross Byrne take? 2 minutes 13 seconds.
The reset scrums are the real.
That's the real killer
and
at the moment.
There's drinking water, and there's chatting to each other, and there's asking Johnny Sexton, should we tie our shoelaces this way or that way? It's not the way.
Basketball is action-packed, 4x10 quarters. We were just talking about, do you feel better or worse when you add quarters or more breaks into a game? As a player, you probably don't. I think hockey, I remember, there's not. What would happen or change if you made it a shorter game? That's my question always.
Is there an argument that, fitness is such now that if you take teams that are somewhat defensive and they get into their banks of 4 and they defend, that you almost need the 90 minutes for them to get a bit tired and the game to become a bit ragged, that if it was 60 minutes they'd be able to...
This is why my husband only watches the second half of football matches. He's like, if I turn on a match, he's like puts his head in a book or just like walks out of the room. He's like, I'll watch the second half or the last 15 minutes, for that reason, that more stuff happens.
Game opens up a bit.
Yeah,
the game might never open up otherwise.
Yeah, and I do feel, remember the water breaks during COVID in the GA? That they were terrible because they broke the game.
They broke the momentum.
They broke the momentum. So if one team was about to come back or do something, then the team had a chance to regroup. Particularly if they're the stronger team, they get a chance to regroup.
I remember when inter-county GA was 60 minutes, and then it went to 70 minutes, and I don't think that it makes a huge big difference.
70 is a lovely number.
I think 70 is a fair number.
60 and 70 are both lovely numbers. And then if you are going to 80 or 90 for football or rugby, they do need to crack down on the wasting. Because yesterday, when was it yesterday or the day before, Leinster were playing, it felt like it went on forever. It was like, oh my God, there's like, how's this match still happening?
There's not a child in the house watched.
Yeah.
Rugby's the most out of control.
It is, yeah.
And we know from the big conclave that they had in November that they're going to try and start cracking down on it now. And in fact, the rules exist. I think it's just that they're not actually enforcing them. Yeah.
Another example of rugby being led away with.
And if football did the same thing with VAR, it's like giving yourself too much time just gives yourself too many pathways to go down. Whereas if you say, right, VAR only, like VAR is not actually like that, it's not actual AI, it's still a person making the decision. Give that person 45 seconds and then they have to come back, make a decision. If it's not very clear in 45 seconds, then it's not clear enough to like lose your life over. It's fine. It's interesting. Whichever way you decide, we won't.
And these stats are actually go across all the leagues as well. So the Dutch, actually the ball is in play most, 97%, is that it? Or 59, sorry, in play. The ball was in play for 57 minutes in the Dutch league, French league 55, English, the Premiership 54, Bundesliga 53, dropping down all in all the time. It's interesting. World Cup was 58.
When I watch a match now, I turn on the TV at Kickoff team, I press pause and I come back about 15-20 minutes later. That is how I watch matches.
So that you can forward the bits.
Just forward through all the stoppages, I'd recommend it. You need it desperately.
I need to do it. But it's funny, I've just always had it. I think it's about the nature of football. I maybe just haven't watched a lot of really bad soccer in the 70s and 80s and thinking, no, it doesn't need to be this long. I'm delighted to see it raised.
It's been raised.
It may never change.
I don't really know what we say about this or what the talking point is. It's actually just very interesting, and Mick Foley, really clever idea. He took Gianni Infantino's call for the Pele Stadium to appear in every country, and he thought to himself, GAA grounds around the country, who are they all named after? And he has it broken down in a really neat graphic, which makes things very easy. So we have, because it's amazing, there's Pearse Parks all over the place, but in some cases that's Padraig Pearse, and in other cases that's the administrator Pearse. So there are a bunch of grounds which are just generic names, and there's scope there to maybe do something more interesting. For instance, Athletic Grounds in Armagh, Aughrim in Wicklow, Breffni Park in Cavan, Celtic Park in Derry, Drogheda, as it's called, in Louth. Limerick have gone for the Gaelic Grounds, obviously, Porktalton in Meath, Tuam Stadium in Tuam, Wexford Park in Wexford. So they're the generic names. We have stadiums named after the administrators. So Cusack Park in Clare, Cusack Park, Westmeath, Fraher Field, Waterford, Nolan Park in Kilkenny. See, I would never have given a second thought to what Nolan Park, who it's named after, but it's administrator. I didn't know Porky Queeve was after administrator, so Porky Queeve is an administrator. Pearse Park in Longford, Walsh Park in Waterford. Then we have the section which he calls the Rebels. So that's Austin Stack, Casement Park, Markovich Park, Park Sean McDermott, Pearse Park in Longford, Pearse Stadium Galway. Then we have the clergy section. Crow Park, Dr. Cullen Park, Father Tierney Park. McHale Park in Mayo I didn't know was after clergymen. O'Donnell Park, Donegal. Park Esler in Down, that's after clergymen. The Chieftains, O'Connor Park in Offaly. O'More Park in Laois, didn't know. And then not many stadiums named after players. Semple Stadium is, Fitzgerald Stadium is in Kerry, and Porky Rinn in Cork is. And then a couple after politicians, Dr. Hyde Park, Roscommon, Parnell Park, of course, in Dublin. And then the Saints, St. Conleth's Park Kildare. I never thought...
I never...
We both played there.
Yeah.
You never gave it a second thought.
I never thought, like, who's St. Conleth?
Yeah, I never even thought about that.
Never even asked. Yeah.
And St. Tiernan's doing him in Monaghan, yeah.
And St. Tiernan's Park, Monaghan. Again, I don't know what the question is, but it's interesting.
Yeah, and actually he says that the former Dublin hurling manager Humphrey Kelleher has spent years researching the origins of park names, and he's going to bring out a book on it, which I think would be really quite interesting as well.
Like Phoenix Park.
Yeah, explaining, and how they built how parks came about in the GA, and then the history of them, really. So it sounds interesting. But he makes the point as well that a lot of our the GA has stadiums, but very often they don't call stands after people. And he's making a point that and I've said this more than once, I think, that Páirc Uí Chaoimh still hasn't named any of its stands, and he's throwing the ball in here. There was a brilliant debate, I don't know whether you saw it, he was on Twitter during the week, and when Infantino made this thing, people started doing how would you change the names of Irish ones? So they were Pelly Park, Parky Pele, King Pele, Breffney Park, all this stuff was going on. But he does say he's thrown in 3 for stand names in Páirc Uí Chaoimh: JBM, Jimmy Bryan Murphy, Jack Lynch, Billy Morgan, and a toss-up between Breach Corkery and Rena Buckley. I can't understand how there isn't one called after Rena Buckley already.
So is it north, south, east and west currently? Or what is, usually that's...
Flake away, he says, come in with your suggestions.
It's funny because Michael Foley and Jonathan Wilson were obviously thinking along the same lines, just different sports. Jonathan Wilson in the Observer was talking about this and saying that I guess there's been a lot of talk about statues and naming things over the last while. If you go too far back, there's a lot of bad stuff in people's history, and should we have statues of them, etc. But he was saying for local communities, like for putting statues up and naming stands after local heroes can be a real way of owning your community and kind of doing it a bottom-up thing rather than a top-down thing. So he was saying that like the idea of naming places in Argentina after Pele would be crazy, and that it is a way of showcasing your local big stories and your big wins. So it was interesting that Michael Foley was saying the same thing. We do have a thing here for like naming bridges in Dublin that the person has to be dead a certain amount of time, and I don't know, I think it's a bit of a fail-safe just in case something bad does come out about them, that like you don't have that big hoo-ha about like, oh, we've named this stadium now after this person, and then something bad has come out about them. But hopefully you wouldn't have to worry too much about that in GA circles.
How high is too high is the headline Peter Riley's piece. So the choke tackle is getting on now. 2008-09 was when Les Kiss, the defence coach, spotted a loophole in the law and came up with the choke tackle. And pretty much, as the piece Peter O'Reilly has written in the Sunday Times points out, pretty much helped Ireland on their way to a Grand Slam in 09. So he says the choke tackle was and remains a group effort. First, defender holds ball carrier upright, blocks the offload, then supporting teammate maintains the choke until the referee calls maul, whereupon the ball carrier is dragged down, scrum is awarded to the defending team, cue, back slaps and hugs. And it's interesting, Stephen Ferris, who famously picked up Will Genia and ran half the field the World Cup in 2011, says, at the time I thought it was a great rule, but now I absolutely hate it, is the interesting line. He says this law was initially meant to speed up the game, now it slows it down. Plus, the tackle, obviously, and I guess Johnny Sexton is a good man to initiate a choke tackle. The tackle height increases the risk of concussion, the risk of concussion being 4 times greater when the tackler is upright, and the tackler is the more likely to be the injured party. And Peter Riley says it's a terrible look for a sport already suffering from a disastrous player safety image. So the choke tackle, alive and well, and very much an Irish thing.
Yeah,
still,
but I don't think, is it alive and well though, Joe? You see far less of them, I still think, don't you, as well?
To be fair, Dennis Leamy's quoted saying they don't coach it at Munster anymore.
Yes, they don't. And this is
he
really
says
interesting.
he thinks it's the same everywhere else as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's an interesting piece though, also because Peter O'Reilly is looking at where it might go next and what the discussions have been on it, on the tackling and lowering the tackle area, and whether it's going to be set at the navel or below the sternum or whatever's going to happen. And actually, interesting that Éanna Falvey, who people would know as former Irish top medic with Irish rugby, and now with World Rugby, they're talking about even on the HIA protocols and all of that. He was very involved in discussions on that recently, as was Joe Smith. So it's just an interesting piece about where it's going to go. But I actually think you don't see as much of them at all. And I think it's probably come up again in relation to because of Sexton's injury last week as well.
I think if they got the consistency right in the refereeing, we would talk about it a lot less because you wouldn't see as many. What we do see is we see them and then we see them being disciplined differently.
Yes, and that's part of this discussion, isn't it?
I think that we feel like we see them a lot more because we have to talk a lot more about the events of the matches because of them. I think if they get that consistency piece right, because we're talking about this a long time now.
Yeah.
So the players coming through now should know how to tackle. So you shouldn't be seeing things like Sexton getting injured because of his own tackle.
And they're not being they're certainly not being coached to tackle high.
So that the coaching should be coming through now. The players coming through, it should not be coached to do this. Stuff.
It's a big change from a decade when it was the most celebrated tactic.
Well, and it was
rugby.
such a strong part of Ireland's armour. I mean, literally invented it, and we're brilliant at it. Pioneered it. Yeah, and we're brilliant at it.
Graham Rowntree did not want to talk about the issue of concussion or head height tackles in a recent interview with Paul Kimmage. You might remember this interview happened towards the end of last year. It was 2-3 pages, and Paul Kimmage and Graham Rowntree go quite a way back. They first met when Paul Kimmage was writing Matt Hampson's book, the young English prop at Leicester, who was paralysed. Extraordinary book, and Rowntree knew Hampson, was a mentor to Hampson, and that's where Paul Kimmage and Graham Rowntree first got to know each other. So Paul reached out for an interview late last year and they sat down. And so he says, it was obvious from the first moment we sat down at the Castle Troy Park Hotel in Limerick that someone had got to him. He seemed edgy or guarded. And so Paul detailed some of the conversation. This didn't appear in the original interview late last year. The first half hour went swimmingly, says Paul Kimmage in his piece here. They talked a little bit about him personally and how he was getting on. And then he said, the question Paul asked was, what about the suggestion that the game was healthier in the amateur era when you played? Healthier? Yeah, healthier. In what regard? Paul says, you're an intelligent man. I shouldn't have to spell that out for you. Graham laughed. Well, clearly I'm not. Healthier, said Paul Kimmage, with regard to the concussion, the physicality, the damage being done. How long was your playing career? And Graham Rowntree says started at 19, finished at 35. And it seems at a certain point, Graham Rowntree says, I'm not getting into it. Why not? Because I don't want to. Okay, I said, we'll park it. And Paul Kimmage writes, I was ready to park it. It had been a fair question and he'd given me a fair answer. But then he said something that wasn't fair. I'm not going to create a headline for you. I shook my head and sighed. Paul, I'm not naive, said Rowntree. You can stop this now if you want. I'll walk out. I'm not afraid. I'm not getting effed over. Paul replied, I don't do headlines. Rowntree, I don't care. I'll walk out now. Paul, I'd rather you didn't walk out. Graham, me too, but I'm not going to get pulled into something that concussion, dementia. I'm not getting pulled into that. Make it about my life and times as you said it would be, my story, but don't F me over trying to create some juicy story about concussion. I don't do juicy stories. You clearly do. I clearly do not. You've made your career from doing it, said Rowntree. And now I was really pissed, said Paul Kimmage. And he mentioned how he'd taken 4 years out of his life to write the Matt Hampson book. That was not a financially motivated thing. That wasn't a juicy story. You're accusing me of writing juicy stories. No, I'm saying you're not going to get one out of me. I don't do that. I'm trying to explain that's what I do. I'm trying to explain that's not what I do. And on it goes. Rowntree replies, it's not a reflection on what you've done. I couldn't give an F, but you're not doing it to me. You're not going to create a concussion story out of me. And Paul says, well, the question was whether the game is healthier. Why the F should I stay here now? You've had a little rant at me because I'm not going to roll over for you. I don't want you to roll over, Graham. You got me here to talk about concussion. Oh, for F's sake, I said. It's a small aspect of the interview. Forget about it. We'll move on. And I guess the point of publishing it now, I guess Paul says it's fair game. My questions about the game were valid. Rugby's in serious trouble. Will it even be played 20 years from now? What's the answer? And how's it going to get fixed if those who earn a living from the game, the administrators, managers, coaches and players, won't acknowledge or address the issue? That's why, true to me, I'm raising them now. And he says Graham's had a rough ride with Munster, turning things around. He texted him a well done last week, but he felt the need to publish the piece anyway.
Yeah,
I'm surprised Roundtree, as an initial thought, found that question particularly offensive. Like,
that was my...
Because you hear things through the grapevine in journalism. I had half heard that there'd been a bit of a tetchy moment in this interview.
Yeah, it had been mentioned in one of, I think, Brendan Fanning's.
Maybe it was.
Yeah.
I had fully anticipated, given Paul's work in this regard previously, I was fully expecting, that's about drugs.
It would be on drugs, yeah.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.